He woke up in a stranger's body and immediately checked his pulse. 120. His pupils were responsive. No concussion. 3 men stood over him, wiping his blood from their fists. And he lay there in the mud, calmly diagnosing himself. The cold hit his face before his consciousness returned. G-dirt had gotten into his nose and mouth. His body wouldn't obey him. A hammer was pounding in his temple. He forced his eyelids open. The light was blinding. 3 men stood over him, leather coats, heavy boots. One wipes his knuckles on his pant leg. There's blood on his knuckles. His blood. The hunter leans down, spits next to his head, swears he's stubborn, swears they'll meet at the butcher's, calls him a wimp. The second one laughs. The third is already leaving. And he lies by the back gate of some building, trying to figure out one thing: where he is. Because 4 minutes ago, it was a different life. 4 minutes ago, Daniel Seo was finishing up an autopsy report at the Harborview morgue. 3rd year of residency, night shift. His boots slid across the wet. His temple slammed into the corner of the table. Darkness. And now, dirt. A stranger's body. A stranger's pain in his ribs from a stranger's blows. He sits up. The world sways like a ship's deck. He presses his fingers against his ribs. No fracture. A bruise. Breathing hurts, but it's bearable. He looks at his hands and freezes. Slender. Young. With calluses on the palms. These aren't his hands. His hands are wider, and he has a scar from a scalpel on his index finger. He's seeing these hands for the first time, but these hands know him. And then a wave of memory hits him. Someone else's. A boy. 19 years old. An orphan in the Chunryun Guild. Every year he went for a talent assessment. Every year he left empty-handed. Today they brought him out before the ranks of recruits. They forced him to his knees. 3 of them struck him. The boy fell. The boy was thrown out through the back gate. And the boy never got up again. Because the boy was dead. And Daniel Seo stood up. A 27-year-old pathologist from Seattle. 3 years of autopsies under his belt. A habit of washing his hands for 40 seconds. And an unresolved case in a morgue thousands of miles away and a lifetime from here. He stands up. He wipes his face with his sleeve. He looks at the gray rag tied so tightly to his wrist that his skin has turned white. He looks at the guild gates. He looks at the sky. And the sky is wrong. Too low. Dark lines stretch across it like cracks in broken glass. A pale light seeps from one far to the north. This isn't his world. But this is his body. His now. Coroners don't cry in the dirt. Coroners make a diagnosis. And he walks. Someone else's memory leads him on its own. The slums behind the eastern wall, narrow alleys, the smell of boiled cabbage. People with gray bandages on their wrists sit against the walls. No one looks at him. A nobody among nobodies. And here he sees the first oddity. At the intersection lies a carcass the size of a large dog. Dark fur. 4 eyes. A ripped open chest. Nearby, a man in a leather apron is chopping it up with an axe and tossing the pieces into a cart. So Dohan freezes. His brain kicks in before his thoughts. The anatomy is wrong. Both lungs are shifted to the left. The rib cage is crooked. And the heart. He squints. There isn't just one heart. 2. One normal, the other tiny. And between them, a dark mass. An organ. An unknown organ. And the man is chopping right through it. Dark fluid splatters into the mud. So Dohan takes a step closer. The man barks at him to move along. There's nothing for dummies to catch here. He nods, politely, as if to a patient, and moves on. But he remembers. 2 hearts, an unknown organ. They're hacking at random, wasting material. The world is called Hyungyang, the limit. The sky cracked long ago. Creatures crawl out of the cracks, monsters made of compressed mana. People are born with cores. The core decides everything. No talent, no life. A gray bandage, a dummy, the bottom. He reaches the cubicle in 40 minutes. A cot, a stool, a basin, an apron on a nail. Under the bunk, a box of someone else's things. At the bottom, a wooden bird, roughly carved by a child. Someone else's memory whispers that Ju Young carved it with a vegetable knife when the boy was 13. And then the door swings open without a knock. A woman stands in the doorway, thin, her hands red from washing clothes. Her eyes are huge. She looks at him as if he were a ghost. Ju Young, 22 years old, the guild's youngest maid. She raised this boy for 10 years, fed him, washed his clothes, carved a little bird for him, the only person on this planet who cares whether he's alive or dead. She rushes toward him, grabs him by the shoulders, feels his face, looks for wounds, finds them. A bruise, a split lip. Her eyes glistened. She says she's been looking for him for 3 hours, that she ran to the gate, that she was afraid he was… And she doesn't finish her sentence. But he looks at her and feels two things at once. A boy's childlike love for this woman, and his own cold clinical assessment as a doctor. Chronic malnutrition, anemia, hands cracked from lie. She's 22 but looks 30. She's been killing herself for someone else's child for 10 years. He raises his hand and places it on the top of her head. A stranger's gesture. The boy didn't do that. The boy would bury his face in her shoulder and cry. But he speaks softly. Sister Chuyong, you have the day off tomorrow. Sleep in until 10. I'll make breakfast myself. She freezes, pulls away, looks at him. Something has changed. He speaks differently. He stands differently. Before, he used to hide his eyes and slouch. Before, after beatings, he would lie motionless for hours. But now, he sits up straight and looks her in the face like an adult. She doesn't understand, but she nods and cries, quietly, silently. He doesn't promise that everything will be okay. Pathologists don't make promises they can't guarantee. He says something else, that tomorrow he needs to get to the slaughterhouse, that he needs a knife, any knife, even a kitchen knife, and a clean rag, and water. She wipes her eyes, asks why. He looks at his hands, slender, young, scarless, but his fingers remember. 3 years of residency, 2,000 incisions. He says he's going to work. She brings a knife an hour later, a kitchen knife, dull. He runs his finger along the blade. Poor steel, won't work for cartilage. It'll do for the first day. He lies down, closes his eyes. Someone else's memory and his own mingle like two streams of water. The boy remembers the streets and the names. Daniel remembers anatomy and histology. And today he saw a creature with 2 hearts and an unknown organ. And the man chopped that organ with an axe like a log. This world is teeming with creatures of incredible anatomy. And everyone around is chopping them up like firewood. No one performs autopsies. No one studies them. No one knows what's inside them. Pathologists don't cry in the dirt. Pathologists make a diagnosis. And then they take a scalpel. He falls asleep with a knife under his pillow. And at the last moment, his hand reaches out on its own to the wooden bird on the stool. The boy inside him isn't quite dead yet. Maybe he won't die. The morning began with pain. His ribs made themselves known with his first breath. Sodo-han sat up on the cot and ran his fingers along the left side of his chest. The swelling had increased overnight, the 4th and 5th ribs. Intercostal neuralgia would set in a couple of days if he didn't do something about it. He tore an old shirt from the boy's box and wrapped it around his chest. Not perfect, but the pressure was distributed. Breathing became easier. Ju-young was sleeping on the floor by the door, curled up on a thin mat like a dog at the doorstep. She hadn't gone to her room. She was keeping watch. He looked at her for 30 seconds. Then he stood up, quietly, found a basin of water, washed his face, looked into the cloudy mirror on the wall. A stranger's face. Thin, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, a bruise under his right eye. His lip was swollen. 19 years old. He looked 16. Undernourished, unloved, a dead boy in the mirror. He turned away, went out, found the market from someone else's memory, bought rice and dried fish for the boy with his last few coins. Rice and dried fish. He returned. Ju Young was no longer asleep. She was sitting on the floor with tear-filled eyes. She saw him with food in his hands and opened her mouth. He didn't let her speak. He put the rice on to cook. He told her to sit down. She sat down. She looked at him with wide eyes. He cooked the rice in silence. The rice turned out fine. No worse than at home when he cooked it for himself at 3 in the morning between shifts. He served her the first portion. She didn't touch it. He said he wouldn't leave until she ate. She picked up a spoon. Her hands were shaking. She ate and cried. He looked at her hands. Micro cracks in the skin between her fingers. Redness around her nails. Contact dermatitis from constant exposure to alkaline solutions. In Seattle, he would have prescribed her a corticosteroid cream and referred her to a dermatologist. There are no corticosteroids here, but there are living beings with organs containing substances. He finished his portion, took a knife, wrapped it in a rag, looked at Ju Young, said he'd be back by evening, told her not to do laundry today. She nodded. She didn't believe him, but she nodded. The slaughterhouse was located behind the outer wall of the guild quarter, a large open-air yard, a stone floor flooded with a dark liquid, dozens of wooden tables. Carcasses lay on the tables, creatures of various sizes and shapes, small ones like cats, medium ones like calves. In the far corner, something huge, the size of a van. People in aprons were chopping, with axes, cleavers, long curved knives. They were chopping roughly, quickly, haphazardly, bones in one pile, meat in another, skin in a third. Sometimes they pulled a stone out of a carcass, murky, dull, the size of a walnut, a crystal. They put it in a bag. Soto stood at the edge of the yard and watched. His eyes moved on their own, without a command. That butcher cut open the creature's chest, 2 organs inside. He cut out one. He crushed the other with his elbow as he bent down. Fluid spilled onto the table, a useless waste. Here's another one. He's cutting the spine, crosswise. He sliced through something thin and white. A nerve, or not a nerve, a channel, a mana-conducting bundle. He severed it, and the crystal in the chest cavity flickered and went dark. It went from bright to murky, right before his eyes. So Dohan blinked. He looked again. Definitely. The crystal went out the moment the channel was severed. A connection. A direct connection between the channel in the spine and the quality of the crystal. No one noticed it. No one had even been looking. A man approached him. Old, gray-haired, broad-shouldered, hands like shovels. His face was tanned from the sun. He held his right hand strangely, slightly bent. He didn't fully straighten it. An old injury. So Dohan knew him. The foreign memory knew. Pak, the senior butcher. The boy had worked for him for 2 years as an assistant. Pak was rough, but not mean. He didn't hit him. Sometimes he gave him bread. Pak looked at him, at the gray bandage, at the battered face. He grumbled that he'd heard, muttered that they were bastards, then asked what the hell he was doing there. If they kicked him out, they kicked him out. So Dohan bowed, not deeply, politely, said he wanted to work in the cutting room, not as an assistant, as a butcher. Pak snorted, looked at his hands, thin, holding a kitchen knife and a rag. He said he didn't need boys who'd cut themselves in wine. So Dohan said he wouldn't cut himself. He said he needed one carcass, any one, the cheapest. A horned mole would do. 1 hour. If he didn't like the result, he'd leave and never come back. If he liked it, he'd stay and work every day. Pak chewed his lip. Then he waved his hand. In the far corner, a dozen carcasses of horned burrowers, F-rank, disposable material. They extracted bone-strengthening crystals from them. Weak, cloudy. Standard yield, 1 crystal from 5 carcasses. Sodohan approached the first carcass. He placed a rag nearby, unfolded his knife, crouched down, looked. A horned mole, about the size of a large badger, 6 legs, a shell on its back, a blunt snout, eyes closed. Dead for about 6 hours, judging by the temperature and rigor mortis. He placed his hands on the carcass, ran his fingers along the rib cage, found the ribs. He counted them. 7 pairs. Earth mammals have 12 or 13. Here, 7. A different anatomy. He pressed between the 4th and 5th ribs. The tissue gave way. Softer than he expected. The cartilage was thinner. He took the knife and made the first incision, smooth, long, along the intercostal space. His hand remembered. 3,000 hours in the autopsy room. The body was different. The knife was different. But his hand remembered. He spread the edges of the incision. Inside, it was dark and damp. A smell, sharp, not putrid, chemical. Mana smells. He hadn't known that before. Now he knew. He worked slowly, carefully. He separated each layer of tissue with his fingers before cutting. He found the first heart, small, firm. He found the second, even smaller. Between them, that very knot, a dark organ the size of a grape. He touched it with the tip of the knife, hard, denser than the surrounding tissues, connected by thin threads to the spine, a mana-conducting bundle. There it was. Dohan traced the bundle with his fingers, from the organ to the spine, from the spine up to the skull, and down to the pelvis. A system, a closed system. The organ generates, the bundle conducts, the crystal accumulates. He figured this out in 20 minutes. The local butchers had been working here for years and didn't know, because they didn't look, because they were chopping. The crystal wasn't in the ribcage like everyone thought. The crystal was behind the 3rd vertebra, between 2 processes, protected by a bony arch. Everyone looked for it in the chest. Everyone chopped at the chest. Everyone damaged the mana-conducting bundle. And the crystal went dead. So Dohan went around the spine from the side. He cut through the muscle layer along the spinous processes. He spread it open. There it was, the crystal, the size of a pinky fingernail, transparent, bright, intact. He extracted it with 2 fingers, placed it on a rag. The crystal glowed with a soft, milky light, pure. So Dohan looked at the carcass. There's more here. He went back inside. The grape, the dark organ between the hearts. He extracted it whole, without cutting it, separated it from the bundle with precision. He placed it next to the crystal. Then he systematically went through the carcass, every organ, every gland, every node. 40 minutes later, 7 crystals lay on the rag. 7, from a single carcass. Pure, bright. Next to them lay 4 organs that no butcher in this courtyard had ever extracted, because they didn't know they existed. So Dohan stood up. His knees ached from the awkward position. His back throbbed. His ribs made themselves felt. He cracked his knuckles. He turned around. Pak was standing behind him. He'd been standing there for a while. His mouth was open, his eyes wide. 2 other old men stood nearby, their mouths open too. So Dohan held out his palm with 7 crystals. He said, "Here." Pak didn't move. He looked at the crystals, then at the carcass, then at the crystals. 7, from a single carcass. Clear. The standard is 1 cloudy 1 out of 5. He reached out and took 1 crystal, brought it up to his eyes. He turned it over, put it back. Took another one, also clear, put it down. He looked at So Dohan as if seeing him for the first time. So Dohan pulled a small bottle from his bosom. Clay. He'd found it that morning at the market. Empty. Bought it for half a copper coin. Inside was a dark, thick liquid. He'd prepared it that night from the first creature he'd seen yesterday at the crossroads. He'd gone back there after dinner. The carcass was still lying there, not fully butchered, abandoned. He took the adrenal glands, both of them. He ground them in a rag, mixed them with fat, a simple ointment, anti-inflammatory, an analog of Earth's cortisol. Rough, but it works. He handed the bottle to Pak. He said quietly, "Mr. Pak, your right arm hurts when it's going to rain." An old fracture, most likely the radius. Here's a month's supply. Rub it in at night, made from animal adrenal glands. If it helps, he'll come back to work tomorrow. If not, let him throw it away and forget about it. Pack took the bottle. He looked at it. He looked at the boy with the gray bandage and the battered face. The boy he'd known for 2 years, who swept his floors and carried buckets for him, who had never in his life held a knife the way he did today. Pack said nothing. He shoved the bottle into his coat, grumbled that he should be there at 6 tomorrow, and left. Together with Dohan, he gathered the crystals, wrapped them in a rag. He set the organs aside. He kept the grape for himself. He took the rest to Pack. That evening, he sat in the cubbyhole and examined the dark organ by the light of an oil lamp. The grape. Dense. Firm. If his theory is correct, this is the gland responsible for the creature's ability. The horned earth digger has one ability: skin hardening. This gland concentrates the very essence of that ability. Local hunters kill the creatures and obtain crystals. They sell the crystals. Artifacts are made from the crystals. But no one knows that there is another organ, more important than the crystal, more important than anything else, an organ that holds the ability itself. He twirled the grape between his fingers. The foreign memory was silent. The boy knew nothing about this. His own memory suggested. Organ transplantation, tissue compatibility, immunosuppression, biocompatibility. If this organ can be prepared, if it can be cleansed, if it can be introduced into the body so that the body doesn't reject it, then... So Dohan placed the grape in a clean cloth, wrapped it up, hid it under the floorboard. The floorboard lifted easily. The boy hid things here too. Under the floorboard lay a notebook, old, worn. He pulled it out, opened it, and froze. The handwriting wasn't the boy's. The language wasn't local. Korean, with Latin terms, medical terms, anatomical terms. Someone before him, someone with the same knowledge, someone who had lived in this body before. His hands trembled. He flipped to the last page, 3 lines, in clumsy handwriting, as if written in a hurry or in pain. He read it, closed the notebook, put it back under the floorboard, lay down on the cot. The ceiling was cracked, like the sky. Foreign words stood before his eyes. 3 lines, instructions, for whoever comes next. He isn't the first. He is a link in the chain. Soto closed his eyes. His ribs ached. His lip stung. His heart was pounding. Not 120, already 90. His body was calming down. His mind wasn't. Tomorrow at 6 to the slaughterhouse. A grape under the floorboard. His predecessor's notebook nearby. A gray bandage on his wrist. A knife under the pillow. A wooden bird on the stool. Ju Young breathes quietly in his sleep behind the wall. The first day was over. A week later, Park was walking without pain. His right arm was fully extended for the first time in 12 years. He didn't tell anyone where he got the ointment, but he stopped yelling at So Do-han. Everyone noticed. Old Man Cho was the first to notice, then Moon, then Kwan. 3 old men who had worked in the cutting room for 20 years and seen thousands of carcasses. They watched as the boy with the gray bandage crouched down by the carcass and worked. Not hacking, slicing. Slowly, carefully. As if there were a crystal vase inside, not a dead monster. And the result? They saw the result. 5 crystals from one carcass, 7 from another, 4 from a small one, but all clear, not a single cloudy one. In a week, So Do-han produced more clear crystals than the entire yard did in a month. Old Man Cho was the first to approach. Silently, he placed his best knife next to Do-han. Long, thin, with a bone handle. He said nothing and left. The next day, Moon brought a night scorpion carcass, a rare one. Usually, those went to the senior butchers. Moon placed it in front of Dohan and said it would be interesting to look at. Together, Dohan and Moon dissected the night scorpion in an hour and a half. A different anatomy, an exoskeleton. The internal organs were arranged differently. The mana-conducting bundle ran not along the spine, but along the ventral side. The crystal lay in the tail, right at the very tip, where the venom gland is. Everyone cut off the tail and threw it away because it was poisonous. Dohan separated the venom gland and the crystal in 3 movements. The crystal turned out to be Class D, a rarity. Moon sat on a crate and stared at the crystal for 3 minutes without blinking. Then he stood up, left, returned with a bottle of rice vodka. They didn't drink. So Dohan didn't drink alcohol, but he accepted the bottle. Moon sat down next to him and spoke for the first time in a week. He asked where the boy had learned this, so Dohan paused. Then he told the truth. Part of it. He said he saw things differently, that he'd always seen them but didn't know how to apply it, that now he knew. Moon chewed his lip. He nodded. He didn't believe it, but he didn't ask any more questions. By the end of the 2nd week, so Dohan had his own corner in the cutting yard, his own table, 3 knives instead of 1. Old Man Cho brought him the best carcasses. Moon made sure no one got in the way. Kwan brought water and clean rags. Park pretended not to notice. But every morning before Dohan arrived, he personally checked that his table was clean. So Dohan worked, every day, from 6 in the morning until dark. He dissected, he studied, he took notes. Not in his predecessor's notebook, in his own, a new one, bought with money from selling crystals. Park paid him a share, a small one, but more than nothing. He described every creature as a new species in the catalog. Horned burrower, 7 pairs of ribs, 2 hearts, ability gland between them, crystal behind the 3rd vertebra, dorsal mana beam, night scorpion, exoskeleton, crystal in the tail, ability gland at the base of the stinger, ventral mana beam, swamp reptile, 12 ribs, 1 heart, 3 livers, ability gland in the far left liver, crystal in the skull, double mana beam. Each new species was like a new case in the morgue. Every evening he came home dirty and smelling of mana fluid. Ju Young waited with dinner. She no longer cried, but she looked at him with that same strange gaze. He had changed. She could feel it. She didn't understand how, but she felt it. Before, he would come home and say nothing. Now he would come home and ask how her day had been. Before, he would eat whatever was served. Now he cooked himself and made her eat first. Before, he didn't notice her hands. Now he examined them every evening. The cracks were healing. The ointment made from the adrenal glands of the creature worked even on humans. He gave her a fresh batch every 3 days. She stopped hiding her hands. On the 18th day, he absorbed the first ability, grapevine, the gland of the horned earth digger, the ability to strengthen the skin. He prepared for 2 weeks. He reread his predecessor's notes 4 times. The predecessor had described the process, briefly, dryly, like a protocol. Extract the gland, clean it of mana-conducting threads, dry at a low temperature for 14 hours, grind into powder. Mix with the bile of the same specimen. Steep in boiled water for a day. Take orally on an empty stomach. Wait. He followed the protocol, exactly. No deviations. He drank it in the morning before dawn while Ju Young was still asleep. It tasted like dirt mixed with iron. Bitter, thick. His stomach twisted in 10 minutes. He lay on the cot and counted his pulse. 110, 120, 130, fever, 38, 38 and 5, 39. His body was rejecting it, like with a transplant, an immune reaction. He'd been expecting this. His predecessor had warned him. The first 2 hours are the most dangerous. If the temperature goes over 40, you have to induce vomiting and get rid of the remnants. He lay there, sweating, counting. 39 and 2, 39 and 5, 39 and 7. The threshold. He clenched his teeth. 39 and 8. The peak. 39 and 7. 39 and 5. It started to go down, slowly, 10 degrees a minute. 4 hours later, the temperature was 37 and 2. 6 hours later, 36 and 8. Normal. He sat down. His head was spinning. He felt nauseous, but his stomach had settled. He looked at his hand. He picked up the knife from the table. He pressed the blade against his forearm. He pressed down. Nothing. He pressed harder. Nothing. Even harder. A thin white streak. The skin wouldn't cut. It resisted, like thick leather, like suede. He put the knife away. A dull kitchen knife couldn't cut through his skin. Skin fortification, lowest rank, the weakest ability of the weakest creature. But it worked. He looked at the gray bandage on his wrist, a dummy, an empty core, no talent. But the creature's metal had taken root. His body had accepted a foreign ability. Not through the core, not through mana channels, through the digestive tract, through the intestinal absorptive membrane, through the blood, like medicine, like food. The world operated by one set of rules. He operated by another. Dohan lay back down. He closed his eyes. There was a strange sensation inside. Not strength, not power, more like density, as if every cell of his skin had become slightly thicker, slightly denser, slightly stronger. A trifle. F rank. A kitchen knife won't cut it. A combat knife will cut through easily. But this is the first step, the first rung. In the evening, he went out onto the street. The slums lived their own life. Gray bandages, dummies, porters, cleaners, corpse carriers, people who weren't considered human. He walked past them and thought. Under the floorboard in the storeroom lay his predecessor's notebook, the last 3 lines. He reread them every evening. To whoever comes after me, do not trust the core. The core is a cage. Seek another path. Claw Tower knows the answer. The predecessor sought the answer. The predecessor died. Now it is his turn. But first he needs to become stronger. And he needs money. And he needs information. In the 3rd week, he saved a human life in this world for the first time. Not some creature on a table. A human. A boy, about 10 years old, the son of a grain merchant from the neighboring district. He ran into the slaughterhouse yard screaming. His mother. His mother had been scratched by the claw of a beast. A small one. A domestic one. One kept in a cage by the shop for entertainment. The beast bit her and scratched her with its claw. A scratch, nothing serious, but 2 hours later, her hand swelled up. 4 hours later, it turned blue. 6 hours later, the woman stopped responding. The boy ran to the healer. The healer asked for 40 silver coins. The grain merchant had 12. The healer closed the door. The boy ran on. Someone told him there was a guy at the butcher's who knew about the beasts. The boy ran there. So Dohan listened, calmly, quietly, just as he had listened to his relatives in the morgue when there was still someone to listen to. He asked what kind of creature. The boy didn't know. Small, green, with 4 eyes. So Dohan went through the catalog in his head. Green, 4 eyes, small, domestic. Small marsh spider, neurotoxic venom, affects the nervous system. Without an antidote, death in 10 to 12 hours. 6 hours have passed. 4 left. Maximum. Antidote. Need the liver of the same species of creature. The bile duct contains an antagonist to the toxin. Natural. Evolutionary. Every venomous species carries its own antidote. Soto turned around. Last night, Moon brought in 3 carcasses of small marsh spiders, discarded. The client didn't like the crystals. The carcasses lay in the corner, untouched. He walked over, cut one open. He found the liver. He found the bile duct. He extracted the contents into an empty vial. 3 drops, dark green, thick. He turned to the boy, said, "Let's run." They ran 3 blocks. So Dohan was gasping for breath. His ribs still ached. His body was weak. 19 years of an undernourished orphan, not the body of an athlete. They reached their destination, a grain shop, the back room. A woman lay on a mattress. Her face was gray. Her arm was black up to the elbow. Her breathing was shallow, 12 breaths per minute, critically low. Her pulse was thread-like. The merchant was kneeling nearby. Sodohan didn't bother explaining. He sat down beside her. He lifted the woman's head. He poured 3 drops into her mouth. He waited. The woman coughed. Good, she has a swallowing reflex. He laid her on her side, a stable position. He waited. 10 minutes later, her arm began to turn pink, starting from her fingers, slowly, like dawn. 30 minutes later, the woman opened her eyes. An hour later, she was sitting up and drinking water. The merchant was kneeling before Sodohan, banging his forehead against the floor. Sodohan lifted him by the elbows, told him to stand up, said she would be weak for 3 days. She needed bed rest, fluids, broth, no alcohol. He said he'd come back tomorrow to check on her. He didn't take any money. The merchant was crying. The boy was crying. The woman was crying. Sodohan stepped out of the shop into the night air and leaned against the wall. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. He hadn't saved anyone in a long time. In the morgue, everyone was dead, already, always. Everyone on his table was already dead, and there was nothing he could do, only describe, record, explain why. But here she was breathing. Here she opened her eyes. Here she drank water and looked at her son. Alive. He stood by the wall and breathed. Deeply. Evenly. 7 breaths in, 7 breaths out. Then he went home. On the way, he bought rice. The market was dark and empty, but one old woman was still sitting there with a sack. He bought it. He came home. Ju-young hadn't slept. She was waiting. He put the rice on to cook. She asked why there was dirt on his knees. He said he'd fallen. He didn't tell her the rest. Not out of modesty, out of habit. Medical examiners don't talk about work over dinner. But 2 days later, the merchant told the story, and the boy, and the woman, and the merchant's neighbors, and the neighbors' neighbors. By the end of the 3rd week, the entire Eastern Quarter knew about the boy with the gray bandage from the slaughterhouse who saved people with drops from the entrails of animals. Rumors spread faster than he worked. By the start of the 2nd month, people began coming to the slaughterhouse, not for the crystals, for him. An old woman with a lame leg, a boy with a rash on his arms, a porter with a broken shoulder that hadn't healed in 6 months. They came timidly. They stood at the edge of the yard. They waited until he was done with the carcass. He never refused. Not once. He examined each one, silently, carefully. Fingers on the neck, fingers on the wrist, a look into the eyes, the color of the nails, the color of the tongue, the rhythm of breathing. 20 minutes for each person. Then he would tell them what was wrong, simply, without fancy words. The old woman limped, not from old age, but from a chronic dislocation that had been set crookedly. He reset it. She screamed. Then she stood up and walked 10 steps again. To the boy with the rash, he gave an ointment made from the spleen of a marsh lizard. The rash cleared up in 4 days. He told the porter with the shoulder problem to come every evening for 5 minutes. He gave him a massage. He worked out the scar tissue. After 2 weeks, the shoulder began to move. He didn't take any money. Not once. People brought food. Rice, fish, vegetables, cloth. Once, they brought a live chicken. Ju-young didn't know what to do with it, so Dohan made broth, strong, with ginger. He brought it to Paku. In the 3rd week, Paku started coughing, a deep, old cough. Sodohan listened to his breathing with his palm pressed against his back. Left lung, lower lobe, wheezing. Not an infection. Fibrosis, 20 years of butchering, dust from the bones of the creatures, nanoparticles in the lung tissue. An occupational disease. He began to brew a decoction for Paku from the lung tissue of a creature filter. A small sponge-like creature that lived in the sewers and filtered water. No one had ever butchered it because it had no crystals, but its lung tissue contained absorber cells. They absorbed and neutralized mana particles, just what was needed. Pak drank the decoction every evening. He grimaced. It was bitter. But he drank it. After 2 weeks, the cough subsided. After a month, it was almost gone. Pak said nothing, but one morning, So-do-han came to the butchery and found a new set of knives on his table. 5 of them, different sizes, razor sharp, with bone handles made from the creature's ribs, the work of a master, expensive. He looked at Pak. Pak stood with his back turned, pretending to sharpen an axe. His ears were red. So-do-han said nothing. He took the knives. He started working. With good knives, the work went differently, faster, more precisely. He was now butchering 3 or 4 carcasses a day. The catalog in the notebook grew, 27 species, each with a detailed diagram. The arrangement of organs, mana channels, crystal extraction points, ability glands, byproducts suitable for medicine. It wasn't just a notebook. It was an atlas, the first anatomical atlas of creatures in the history of Hyungyun. He didn't realize it yet, but others would soon understand. On the 43rd day, Ari arrived. He was working with the carcass of a silver beetle when he caught a scent. Herbal, bitter, fresh. He looked up. A girl was standing at the edge of the yard. Small, thin, freckled, weather-beaten hands. Her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. A canvas bag slung over her shoulder, with bundles of herbs sticking out of it. She sold herbs to the butchers, cheap ones, for treating hides. She came once a week. A stranger's memory knew her. The boy had seen her before. Small, quiet, a herb girl from a mountain village, Ari Chong. But the boy hadn't paid her any attention. But Daniel Seo did, because she was standing at the edge of the yard and wasn't looking at him, at the carcass, at his cuts, at how he worked. She was looking the way a professional looks at another professional's work, with recognition. She came closer. He kept working. She stood there silently for 5 minutes. Then she said he was cutting along the grain, not across it. He stopped, looked at her. She blushed, lowered her eyes, started apologizing. So-do-han said she was right. He said that cutting along the grain preserves the structure of the mana channel. If cut across, the channel breaks and the crystal loses its luster. She looked up. She looked at him, at the cut, back at him. She said she could see it. She sees the channels. She sees the flows. By smell, by the color of the fabric. So-do-han put away the knife, turned fully toward her, her talent, recognizing composition. She can sense what a substance is made of, by taste, by smell, by touch. But no one taught her. No one showed her how to use it. To everyone, she's just a little country girl who sells bundles of herbs for pennies. He picked up 3 bundles from her bag, looked at them, sniffed them, rubbed a leaf between his fingers. The first bundle, 3rd harvest wormwood, late harvest, missing the root, worth 30 copper coins at most. She was selling it for 15. The second bundle, 1st harvest mountain mint, perfect, fresh, dried just right, worth at least 150 silver in any decent alchemy shop. She was selling it for 20. The third, he fell silent, looked her in the eyes, said he'd take the whole 3rd one, 200 per bundle, right now, and told her to come by tomorrow at 3. He'd be brewing. He needed her help. His sense of smell was worse than hers. She stood there blinking, her mouth hung open. He could see her doing the math in her head. 200 per bundle, 8 bunches, 1,600 silver. She made 300 a week. 300. And he was offering 1,600 for a single day. She said that was too much. Said the herbs weren't worth that much. So-do-han shook his head. Said she was worth that much. Her nose, her eyes, her hands. He said that the big alchemists bought from her for pennies because they knew she didn't know her prices. He said she would learn. He said he would show her. She stood there. She looked at him. at the gray bandage, at the battered face that hadn't quite healed yet, at the hands in the dark liquid of the brew, at the masterfully crafted knives that didn't match the gray bandage. And for the first time in 3 years in the capital, someone looked at her and didn't see a country bumpkin. He saw a professional. She went the next day, at 3, with a bag full of herbs. She brewed with Dohan. She stood nearby and sniffed. He asked, "What do you smell?" "Bitterness." "What kind of bitterness?" "The base note, like earth." "Good. That means the extraction is going right." "And now?" "Sweet, light, in the top note. So the aldehydes are coming out." "Stop. Take it off the heat. Done." She watched him while he brewed the way a boy watched his first autopsy, with the same sense of discovery. He knew what he was doing, and for the first time, she met a man who knew. They brewed together for 4 hours. The result? 6 vials of regeneration potion. A standard regeneration potion cost 5 gold pieces. Their potion restored health 3 times faster and left no hangover-like weakness. Because So Dohan had added 3 drops of bile from the same specimen of the creature whose liver had been used to brew the base. The bile neutralized the toxic fraction. No one had done this before him. No one knew what was needed. 6 vials, 15 gold pieces each, 90 gold pieces for the evening. Ari held the vials in her hands and couldn't believe it. So Dohan said this was their combined earnings, split 50-50, 45 for her, 45 for him. She said it was madness. She just stood there and sniffed. So Dohan said that without her nose, he would have missed the moment of extraction and the potion would have been ordinary. He said that without her, he makes potions. With her, he makes medicine. She stood there with the vials in her hands. 45 gold pieces. The medicine for her brother cost 80. 2 brews, 2 evening brews, and her brother would live. She cried, quietly, turned away, wiped her eyes with her sleeve, turned back, said she'd come tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and every day. Dohan nodded. He handed her a clean cloth for her eyes. She took it. She blew her nose, loudly, clumsily. She looked at him and smiled for the first time, widely, with freckles, like the sun peeking out from behind the clouds. He turned away toward the cauldron. For some reason, he smoothed his hair, something he never did, not in this life, nor in the last. The potions had attracted attention, so Dohan knew they would attract attention. He didn't want them to, but he knew. Any product that works better than the standard one attracts those who sell the standard one. The first to arrive was a man from Yunsan's alchemy shop. Yunsan's shop held a monopoly on regeneration potions in the eastern quarter. 7 gold pieces for a standard vial. Cloudy, weak, with the lingering weakness of a 2-day hangover. The man from Yunsan was polite. He smiled. He offered a partnership. So Dohan asked on what terms. The man said that So Dohan would supply potions to Yunsan's shop, 2 gold pieces per vial. The shop would sell them for 15. So Dohan did the math in his head. 2 out of 15. 13% for the producer, 87% for the middleman. He said no, politely, quietly, like explaining to a patient that surgery isn't necessary. The man from Yunsan stopped smiling. He said it was impossible to operate without a license from the alchemy chamber. He said that a dummy doesn't have a license and never could. He said that Yunsan's shop could help. Or not help. So Dohan thanked him for the visit. The man left. 3 days later, 2 men came to the slaughterhouse, not from the shop, from the guild, Chungnyeon, the very same one. They didn't introduce themselves, they didn't smile. One was tall with a long scar on his chin. The other was broad and short with empty eyes. They didn't come to see So Dohan, they came to see Park. They spoke behind closed doors for 10 minutes. Park came out looking ashen, not from the dust, from anger. He walked over to So Dohan, spoke briefly. They want to know who's making the crystals, why production has quadrupled, and who's selling potions without a license. So Do-han nodded, asked what Park had said. Park grumbled that he'd replied that no one was doing anything special, that the output had increased because the carcasses had gotten better, that he didn't know anything about potions. So Do-han looked at Pak. Pak had lied for him. An old man who had known him for 2 years as a boy helper? He'd lied to the guild for a lollipop, risked his job, risked his pension, risked his health. So Do-han said quietly, "Thank you." Park told him to shut up and get to work, and he went off to sharpen his axe. His ears were red. The guild came again a week later, this time not to see Park, to see him. One man, not a thug, not a fighter, a short man in clean clothes, with a notebook, with a polite smile, an inspector. He introduced himself. He identified himself as the assistant chief of supplies for the Chungyong Guild. He said the guild had noticed an increase in crystal output from the cutting yard. He said the guild was impressed. He said the guild would like to offer So Do-han a position, an official one, on the payroll, a special class cutter. Salary, housing, insurance. So Do-han listened. His face was calm. His mind was working. The Chungyong Guild, the very same one that beat up the boy and threw him out the back gate. The very same one whose hunters wiped the blood off their knuckles. The very same one that showed all the new recruits what happens to empty shells. Now they want him back. Because of the crystals. Because of the money. He asked the inspector, who approved the proposal? The inspector said the head of supplies. So Do-han asked if the head of supplies knew he was a hollow. The inspector hesitated, said of course he knew. Said the guild didn't discriminate based on core status in support roles. So Do-han nodded. Drawing from the memory of the other Do-han, he knew the guild's bylaws. The boy had taught him by heart, hoping it would come in handy. It did come in handy. So Do-han quoted Article 32, Section 4. A person whose guild membership has been revoked may not be rehired for 3 years from the date of revocation without the personal approval of the guild head and a written review of the reasons for the revocation. His membership had been revoked 46 days ago. The 3-year period, 2 years and 10 months remained. Personal approval from the guildmaster and a written review. That meant the master had to personally sign a document stating that So Do-han had been expelled unjustly. That meant a public admission of error. Guildmaster Chunryun does not admit mistakes. Ever. Everyone knew that. The inspector turned pale, not out of fear, out of anger. The puppet is quoting the charter to him. The puppet is refusing the guild, citing their own rules. The inspector smiled, a tight smile, coldly. He said he would pass the message along. He said the guild was patient. He said the world was small, and he left. Park was standing around the corner and heard everything. He approached afterward. He said the guy was either the smartest person he'd ever met or the dumbest. So Do-han said it was more likely the latter. Park didn't laugh. He looked serious. He told him to be careful. The guild doesn't like being refused, especially the dummies. So Do-han knew. That evening he came home. Ju-young was cooking dinner with Ari. Ari came by every day now. They brewed potions in the evenings. During the day, Ari sold goods at the market, but now at the right prices. So Do-han had taught her to calculate the value of herbs based on their active ingredients. Her revenue had increased 5-fold. She bought medicine for her brother in the 2nd week. She sent it home to the village with a trade caravan. She waited for a reply. It hadn't come yet. She was worried. She bit her nails. Every evening, Do-han told her the medicine was reliable. She nodded. She bit her nails. He stopped talking. He just placed a cup of tea next to her, silently. She took it. She drank. She stopped biting her nails for 5 minutes. Then she started again. He made more tea. Ju-young watched them, Do-han and Ari. She watched them work, how Ari sniffed and spoke, how Do-han listened and nodded, how their hands sometimes touched over the cauldron, how neither of them noticed it. Ju-young noticed. Something changed in her eyes when she watched. Do-han didn't see it. He saw the anatomy of living beings. He saw channels and glands and crystals. He saw diseases and injuries and ways to treat them. But he didn't see that the woman who raised him no longer looked at him as a boy, because he was no longer a boy, because he spoke like an adult, moved like an adult, made her breakfast, treated her hands, brought home money, protected her, cared for her. The boy hid behind her back. The man put her in front of him. And 22-year-old Ju Young Han could no longer tell herself that he was her younger brother, because he didn't feel like the younger one. At night, So Do-han read his predecessor's notebook. The entries were dated, no years, just days. Day 1, Day 5, Day 20. His predecessor was a doctor, a surgeon, not a pathologist, a living surgeon for living people. He had entered this body earlier. How much earlier, So Do-han could not determine. The entries stopped on the 231st day, 231 days, 7.5 months. The predecessor had lived in this body for 7.5 months. Then he died. The entries grew shorter toward the end, more hurried. The handwriting was shaky. The predecessor had found something. Something connected to the Tower of the Claw. Something had frightened him. The last entries were fragmentary. The Tower of the Claw. Mirror. Not an artifact. A door. The empty ones aren't empty. They're waiting. Someone is calling. Don't trust the core. The core is a cage. Look for another way. To the one who comes after me. So Do-han closed the notebook. He looked up at the ceiling. The dummies aren't empty. They're waiting. What does that mean? The gray bandage on his wrist. A mark of shame. Or a sign of something else. He turned his head. Behind the wall, Ju Young was breathing quietly. Meanwhile, in the city of Ari, she slept in her little room at the market, clutching the money for her brother to her chest. In the slaughterhouse, Park lay awake, rubbing ointment into his hand out of habit, even though the pain had already subsided. At the Chungyun Guild, an inspector was writing a report for the higher-ups, about the dummy, about the crystals, about the potions, about the boy who knows the charter better than the lawyers. So Do-han closed his eyes. 46 days in this world, 1 absorbed ability, 27 species of creatures studied, a notebook with an atlas, his predecessor's notebook with riddles, 3 people who would lie for him to the guild, 1 who comes to cook every evening, 1 who waits for him behind the wall every night. That was more than he had in Seattle. In Seattle, he had a studio apartment and a cactus on the windowsill. He forgot to water the cactus. Here, he himself was watered with broth and tea and warm glances that he hadn't yet learned to read. He fell asleep. A gray bandage on his wrist, a knife under the pillow, a wooden bird on a stool, notebooks under the floorboard. 2. His own and someone else's. The world of Hyungyang lived its own life. A sky with cracks, fault lines, creatures, guilds, the chamber of cores, inquisitors, rank exams, the claw tower on the horizon, a mirror inside the tower, someone on the other side. All of this was still ahead. For now, a quiet boy with a gray bandage slept in a cramped room in the slums, and he dreamed of nothing. Pathologists rarely dream. They already know what's inside. On the 52nd day, So Do-han went hunting for the first time. Not for butchering, for hunting. At night, alone. The safe zone by the eastern wall. Small creatures crawled out here from the sewers. F rank, sometimes E rank. Hunters didn't come here, below their dignity. Patrols checked once a week. The rest of the time, the zone was empty. So Do-han took 3 knives, bone ones, a gift from Pak. He took 4 vials, 2 with a paralyzing solution made from the spinal cord of a night scorpion, 2 empty ones for collecting. He took some rags, thick leather gloves that Ju Young had sewn, an oil lantern, and he set off. He wasn't a fighter, not in his past life, nor in this one. In his past life, he went to the gym 3 times a week, treadmill, basic exercises, nothing serious. In this life, his body was even weaker. 19 years as an undernourished orphan. In a month and a half, he'd gained 4 kilograms. He ate protein, rice and fish every day, did push-ups in the mornings, started with 10. Now he was doing 30. His body was getting stronger, slowly. like any normal person. No magical leveling up. No magical growth after killing a monster. Ordinary physiology. Calories, protein, sleep, workout, recovery. The toughening of his skin from the horned mole was his only advantage. F rank. A kitchen knife won't cut it. A combat knife will. The claws of a small creature might not cut through it. Or they might. Depends on the force of the strike. Unreliable protection, but better than nothing. The first creature appeared after an hour of waiting. A sewer slug, about the size of a cat, 4 tentacles, 2 eyes on stalks. Slow, dumb. Dangerous only if you step on it. Acidic slime on its body. It eats through skin in seconds. An ordinary person would have walked right past it. Dohan crouched down 10 meters away and watched. His anatomical eye was at work. Not magic, habit. 3 years of autopsies. Thousands of hours studying bodies. His brain automatically mapped out the layout. The center of the nervous system is in the front of the body, between the eyes. The mana node is probably there too. Acid glands on the sides, 4 of them, symmetrical. The slug's ability is acid slime generation. The ability gland must be connected to the acid glands, probably in the center, between them, just like in all creatures where the ability is distributed throughout the body. So, Dohan stood up. He walked around the slug from the windward side. He took out a vial of paralyzing solution. He opened it. He poured it onto a rag. 3 drops. He approached within 2 meters. The slug turned its eyes on their stalks. So Dohan threw the rag. It landed on the slug's back, between the tentacles. The solution seeped through the skin. The slug twitched. The tentacles tensed. Then went limp. 30 seconds later, it lay motionless, paralyzed, not dead. Its nervous system was blocked. So Dohan approached. He put on gloves. Carefully turned the slug over with a bone knife. The underside, soft. No acid glands. A safe zone. He made an incision, quick, precise, along the ventral line. Inside, everything was as he'd expected. 4 acid glands. Between them, a small dark node, the ability gland, the size of a pea. He extracted it, placed it in a vial. Then he extracted the crystal from the nerve center between the eyes. Small, cloudy, E rank, bordering on F, almost useless on the market. But to him, no crystal was useless. Then he extracted the acid glands, all 4, whole, without damaging the shell. He placed them in a separate rag. Acid secretion in a controlled dosage is a solvent, a powerful one, for processing the bones and chitin of creatures. Yuna at the forge will be happy. He worked for 2 hours, 4 creatures, a sewer slug, 2 E-rank rat-like runners, and 1 blind F-rank woodlouse. From each, he extracted the ability gland, a crystal, and byproducts suitable for medicine or craftsmanship. 4 clean autopsies, not a single unnecessary incision, not a single damaged organ. He returned home at 3 in the morning, dirty, tired, smelling of sewers and mana fluid. Ju Young hadn't been sleeping. She was sitting by the door. She saw him and turned pale. He was covered in blood, not his own, the creature's, but she didn't know the difference. He raised his hands, said he was unharmed, showed her his hands, his legs, his face. Not a single scratch. The skin hardening had worked twice. A rat-like runner had slashed his forearm with a claw. The claw had slipped, left a white streak. No blood. Ju Young touched his hands, checking, not believing it. He let her check. Then he said he needed to wash up and sleep. Tomorrow at 6 for the butchering. She nodded, didn't cry, but her lips were trembling. He washed himself in a basin of cold water and thought. Hunting is possible. Small creatures aren't a problem. The paralyzing solution works. The knives work. The eyes work. The body is weak, but it's enough for the small ones. The problem lies elsewhere. He's not a fighter. If the creature is faster than his solution, if the creature is resistant to the poison, if there are 2 of them at once, then he's a corpse. He needs a fighter, or he needs to become a fighter. The second option takes too long. The first is dangerous. There's no one to trust. Yet. He dried himself off, lay down, pulled his notebook from under the floorboard, jotted it down. Sewer slug. Anatomical diagram. Rat-like runner. Diagram. Blind woodlouse. Diagram. 30 species in the catalog. He closed the notebook, fell asleep. The next morning, he brought Unipack 4 acid glands from a sewer slug. Unipack, Old Man Pack's daughter, 18 years old. She'd been working in her father's smithy since she was 13. Officially an assistant. Unofficially, she did everything. She forged, she sharpened, she worked with bone and chitin, the best young craftsman in the neighborhood, whom no one considered a craftsman because she was a woman. So Dohan knew her through someone else's memory. The boy had seen her in the courtyard, loud, dirty, with scorched fingers. She laughed so hard the cats shuddered. She wore a man's apron. Her father sighed and shook his head, but didn't forbid it. So Dohan placed the glands on the workbench in front of her. She picked one up, sniffed it, winced, asked what it was. He explained. Acidic secretion, concentrated. Diluted 1 to 20, it dissolves chitinous in a minute. Without mechanical action, cleanly, no chips, no cracks. She looked at him, then at the gland, then at him. Her eyes lit up, literally. So Dohan had seen that look before. In grad students when you show them a new method. Hunger, professional hunger. She grabbed the gland and ran to the workbench. An hour later, she burst out of the forge with a piece of processed chitin in her hands. Smooth, even, without a single chip. Such a result usually took 3 days of grinding to achieve. It took her an hour. She screamed that it was impossible. That chitin doesn't behave like that. That it was magic. So Dohan said it was chemistry. She didn't know what chemistry was, but she didn't care. She wanted more. He said he'd bring more, every week, on one condition. He needed a scalpel, made of a butcher's, just one, to cut soft tissue and not get dull on the bone. She said she'd do it. He said that if she did, she'd be his only master. He'd have plenty of orders. She looked at him, at the gray bandage, at his gaunt face, at his calm eyes. A baby, a boy from the slaughterhouse, promising orders. But he wasn't lying, she could tell. Her father had taught her to see when people were lying. This one wasn't. She made the scalpel overnight, from the fang of a night scorpion, thin, curved, so sharp it could cut a hair in mid-air. The handle made from the bone of a horned mole, comfortable, fitting his palm. She took a measurement from his hand before he noticed. He noticed, but didn't say anything. In the morning, she brought the scalpel to the slaughterhouse. Dohan took it, turned it over, tried it on the carcass. The cut went like a dream. Smooth, clean, perfect. He looked at Yuna. She stood shifting from foot to foot, biting her lip, waiting. He said it was the best tool he'd ever held in his hands. In both lives. She didn't understand the part about both lives, but she understood the main thing. He was pleased. She blushed, from her ears to her neck. Her father coughed behind her, so Dohan turned to him, bowed, said that Master Park Yuna had made a tool that would change his work. He said it loudly, in front of everyone, in front of the elders, in front of the butchers, in front of random onlookers. Master Park Yuna. Not an assistant, not Park's daughter, a master. Yuna stood there red as a beetroot. Park Sr. looked at So Dohan for a long time. Then he grumbled that a master is a master, but she can't cook her own lunch. And he left. But his ears were red too. On the 65th day, So Dohan absorbed a second ability, night vision from a blind woodlouse. The process was different. The woodlouse didn't see with its eyes. It saw with heat receptors on its antennae. The ability gland was located at the base of the skull. Small, dry, not moist like a mole's. The predecessor hadn't described this species, so Dohan was flying blind. He dried the gland for 2 days, ground it up, mixed it with the woodlouse's bile. He took it. The rejection was weaker than the first time. Temperature 38.4, maximum. Normal in 3 hours. The body was getting used to it, adapting. The immune system was learning to accept the foreign substance. The result became apparent the following night. He stepped out into a dark alley. He closed his eyes, opened them. The darkness wasn't darkness. Outlines, silhouettes, heat spots, a rat in the corner, a bright little spot, a person behind the wall, a large spot, warm, not full vision, but in complete darkness, he could see. Enough not to walk into a wall, enough to spot a creature before the creature spotted him. 2 abilities, skin hardening, night vision, both F rank, trash by hunter standards, trash by guild standards. But for a pathologist who works at night with sharp objects inside dead bodies, these were the perfect tools. He didn't pretend to be a hero. He pretended to be a surgeon. On the 70th day, life sped up. At the market, a person approached Ari, not a buyer, not an alchemist, a woman, tall, slender, a perfectly straight back, a gold band on her right wrist, her hair pulled back into a strict bun, a beautiful face, cold, expressionless. She bought 3 vials of regeneration potion. She sniffed each one, tasted a drop on her tongue, closed her eyes, opened them, looked at Ari, asked who had brewed it. Ari hesitated. The woman asked again. Her voice was even, without pressure, but Ari felt she couldn't lie. She said she'd brewed it with a partner, from the slaughterhouse. The woman nodded. She bought all 3, paid without haggling, left. Ari ran to Sodohan that evening. She was agitated. She described the woman, tall, a golden bandage, straight back. Sodohan listened. A golden bandage on her right wrist, the mark of a healer's house, highest rank, not just a healer, from a great house. Ari said the woman had tasted the potion on her tongue, so Dohan paused. On her tongue. A high-ranking healer tastes the potion on her tongue. She doesn't scan with mana. She doesn't check through the cannons. She tastes it, just like Ari does, just like he does. Through the body, not through the system. Interesting. He told Ari that if the woman comes again, she should give her the address of the slaughterhouse. Ari asked why. He said he had a premonition. She won't come for the potion. She'll come for the answer to a question that's been tormenting her for a long time. And he knows what that question is. Ari looked at him. She asked how he knew. He didn't answer. He put the kettle on, brewed some tea, handed her a cup. She took it, stopped biting her nails, for 5 minutes. Si-hyun Lee came to the slaughterhouse 4 days later. Not in the morning, in the evening, when the yard was almost empty. Sohan was sitting at his table cleaning his tools. Ari had left an hour ago. Park had left 2 hours ago. The old men weren't there. Just him and a dozen or so carcasses in the far corner. She stood at the entrance, upright, motionless. A gold bracelet on her right wrist glinted in the light of the oil lamps. She looked at the yard with the expression of someone who had walked into the wrong place and knows it, but doesn't leave. So Dohan raised his head, looked at her, stood up, bowed. Not deeply, polite. He said good evening. She didn't bow in return. The golden band bends to gray in only one case. Never. She said she'd come on business, said she'd bought a potion at the market, said the potion didn't meet the standards of the alchemical chamber, said it was illegal, said she wanted to see the one who brews it. So Dohan listened. His face was calm. She had come to expose a charlatan. Fine. He had been expecting this. He said he was the one who brewed it. She looked at the gray bandage, at his hands, stained dark by mana fluid, at the apron over his old jacket, at the bone scalpel on the table. She said a novice couldn't brew potions. A novice has no mana control. Without mana control, extraction is impossible. Without extraction, a potion is impossible. These are the canons of alchemy. Basic course. Dohan nodded. He said she was right. He said he didn't use mana control. He said he used temperature, pressure, acidity, time. He said extraction wasn't magic. Extraction is a physical process of extracting a substance from tissue. Mana control is one method, not the only one. She fell silent. He could see her mind working, quickly, clearly. She wasn't stupid. She was brilliant. But her whole life she'd been taught a single method, and that method had become a wall, behind which she could see nothing. She said it was absurd, that potions without mana control couldn't work any better than standard ones. Do-han didn't argue. He said there was a boy lying in the back room behind the yard, 12 years old. They brought him in 3 weeks ago, damage to the mana channel in his right leg. The leg doesn't work. But the boy taken to 3 healers, the Lee School, the Wong School, an independent healer from the Western Quarter. No one helped. 3 weeks. The boy lies there. His leg is going numb. If it's another 2 weeks, the leg will have to be amputated. He asked if Lady Lee wanted to take a look. She did. He could tell by the way her fingers twitched, a healer's reflex, just like his surgical one. They went into the back room. The boy was lying on a wooden floor, thin, pale. His right leg was blue below the knee. Not from the cold, from stagnant mana. The channel was damaged. Mana wasn't flowing. The tissue was dying. Shi-hyun Lee sat down next to him. She placed her hands on his leg. She closed her eyes. She scanned him. According to her school's teachings, Do-han stood nearby and watched. She opened her eyes after 3 minutes. Her face was pale. She had seen the damage. A rupture in the mana channel at the level of the knee joint. According to the teachings of Lee's school, treating a mana channel rupture requires direct infusion of mana through the point of rupture. The mana fills the channel, and the channel is restored. Standard procedure. It works in 60% of cases. In the remaining 40%, the mana seeps into the surrounding tissue and causes swelling, or worse. And this boy was one of those 40%. 3 healers had tried. 3 times the mana went into the tissue. 3 times swelling. The leg got worse. She knew it. She saw the marks of 3 attempts on the boy's leg. 3 mana burns on the skin. 3 failures. She sat and said nothing. So Do-han crouched down beside her. He placed his hands on the boy's leg. He didn't scan. He touched. He palpated. He pressed at 3 points below the knee. The boy flinched. It hurt. He pressed at 2 points above. The boy didn't flinch. It didn't hurt. He understood. The mana channel is ruptured. All the healers saw that. But they saw only that. They didn't see that beneath the ruptured channel lies another problem. The liver. Not the mana channel, the liver. He turned to Si-hyun. He spoke quietly. Your school treats mana. His mana isn't broken. It's his liver. 2 systems, mana channels and the blood. They are connected. The liver filters the blood nourishes the walls of the mana channel. If the liver isn't working properly, the channel walls thin out, and they tear. Even without trauma, simply because they've become thin. Si-hyun Lee looked at him. He saw something break in her eyes. A wall. That very one, behind which she couldn't see. She said it was impossible, that the mana channels were an autonomous system, that they didn't depend on blood, that it was canon. So Do-han shook his head. He said that canon was wrong. Not about everything, about this. Mana channels run along the blood vessels. He had seen it in every creature's body he had dissected over the past 2 months. The channels and vessels run parallel, everywhere, in every species. It's no coincidence. It's anatomy. They're connected. She was silent. He asked her to do one thing, to direct her healing not into a mana channel, but into the boy's liver. Precisely, as he instructed. Not according to the canon, as he instructed. She was silent for 30 seconds. Then she placed her hands on the boy's stomach. So Do-han guided her fingers. Right side, lower edge of the ribcage. Here. She closed her eyes. She directed the mana. A thin stream, precise, into the liver. So Do-han took a vial out of his pocket. Warm decoction, made from the lung tissue of a creature filter. The same one he'd given Pak for his cough, but a different concentration. A different dosage for a 12-year-old boy, for a boy with a damaged liver. He lifted the boy's head and poured in the decoction. The boy swallowed. Do-han counted. 20 seconds. 30. A minute. He looked at the boy's leg. The blue. Thick. Dense. A minute and 20 seconds. A minute and 30 seconds. The edge of the blue trembled. It began to recede. From the toes, slowly. The skin was turning pink, centimeter by centimeter. The boy sighed, deeply, his first deep breath in 3 weeks. Si-hyun Lee opened her eyes. She looked at the leg. She looked at her hands. She looked at So-doin. He sat calmly, dirty, in an apron, with a gray bandage, with dark spots on his fingers. A nobody from the slaughterhouse, who had just shown the healer of the great Lee household that her cannons were incomplete, that there is a second system, that mana and blood are connected, that sometimes you need to treat not what hurts, but what's broken. She stood up, left the back room, so Dohan stayed with the boy. Checked his pulse, checked his breathing, normal. The boy had fallen asleep. Good. Sleep is the best medicine. He went out into the courtyard. Si-hyun Lee was sitting on the stone step by the entrance. Her back was straight. Her hands were on her knees. Her face was wet. She had been crying, silently. Her back was straight, perfect posture, a golden headband, and tears. So Dohan sat down next to her, not close, at arm's length. He didn't say anything. He just sat there. She spoke first. She said 36. He didn't understand. She said 36 people in 2 years whom she hadn't been able to help, who had died or been left crippled because her method hadn't worked, and she didn't know why. 36. She remembered every one of them. So Dohan nodded. He too remembered everyone who had lain on his table in the morgue, every unsolved case, every unanswered question. A pathologist remembers the dead. A healer remembers those she couldn't save. One pain, different forms. He told her one thing. He said that 36 wasn't her fault. It was the method's fault. The method isn't perfect. No method is perfect. But the method can be supplemented, expanded, if she wants to. She turned her head. She looked at him. Tears were still streaming down her face. Her eyes were red. She asked what he was proposing. He said he was proposing they work together. He knows anatomy. She knows healing. Together, they will cover the 40% that the canon does not cover. She was silent. Then she stood up. She wiped her face with her sleeve, with the same gesture he'd used to wipe his face on that first day in the mud. She said she'd come tomorrow, and she left. Back straight, steady stride, a golden bandage. But something had changed, in her gait, in the tilt of her head. Something had broken, and something had begun to grow in its place. So Dohan watched her go. Then he returned to the back room. The boy was asleep. His leg was pink. His breathing was steady. He sat down on the floor beside him, leaned his back against the wall, closed his eyes. 70 days, 2 absorbed abilities, 30 types in the catalog, the slaughterhouse, night hunting, potions with Ari, a scalpel from Yuna, the boy with the leg, the healer with the broken cannon, Ju Young behind the wall, Park with his silent protection. And somewhere far on the horizon, the tower of the claw, the mirror, the predecessor's notebook, questions without answers. Si-hyun Lee came the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. She came every evening after her shift at the Lee clinic. She changed out of her white ceremonial robe into plain clothes. She tucked the golden sash into her pocket, and she went to the slaughterhouse. No one in the Lee household knew, yet. She stood next to So-dohan and watched as he cut open the creatures. She didn't look away. She didn't flinch. The healer of the great house saw blood every day, but not like this. Not from the inside. Not the system. Not how everything is connected. He showed her, silently, pointing with his finger. A mana channel along the artery. See? She saw. She nodded. She wrote it down in the little notebook she'd brought with her on the second day. A week later, she had her own notebook, parallel to his, but with a different focus. He recorded the anatomy. She recorded the connections between the mana channels and the circulatory system, where they ran parallel, where they diverged, where they crossed. It was a map, a double map of the physical body, mana and blood, 2 layers, 2 languages, 1 organism. In the 3rd week of their collaboration, she laughed for the first time. He was dissecting the gallbladder of a marsh lizard and said that the lizard had 3 livers and none of them knew what the other 2 were doing. Poor coordination, just like in bureaucracy. It was a weak joke, but she laughed, briefly, surprised, as if she'd forgotten what she was capable of. He looked at her. She covered her mouth with her hand, turned away, kept taking notes. Her ears were pink. Dohan went back to work. On the 80th day, 2 things happened at once. First, 2 men approached Ari at the market, big guys, with the Alchemical Guild's emblem on their sleeves. They said her potions had been confiscated, that she was selling without a license, that the fine was 50 gold pieces or jail. Ari turned pale. 50 gold pieces. She had just sent money for medicine to her brother. She had 7 left. She tried to explain. They didn't listen. They took 12 vials. They left. Ari sat on the ground in the middle of the market and stared into space. People walked by. No one stopped. She went to see So Dohan an hour later. She didn't cry. Worse, she was silent. She sat at his table and said nothing. He listened. He nodded. He said he'd look into it. She asked how. He didn't answer. He pulled a box from under the table. Inside the box lay money. His share of the crystals for 2 months, 63 gold pieces. All he had. He counted out 50. He held them out to her. She recoiled. She shook her head. She said she wouldn't take it. He placed the money on the table in front of her. He said it wasn't a gift, it was an advance for the next 3 months of work, for her nose, for her eyes, for her hands. He said that without her, he wouldn't be able to brew a single potion worth more than 3 copper coins. She looked at the money, then at him, then at the money. She took it, silently. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve, with the same gesture. They all had the same gesture, wiping their eyes with their sleeves. The second event. That same evening, a man whom So Dohan had never seen before came to the slaughterhouse. Not an inspector, not a guild member, not an alchemist. Short, middle-aged, an ordinary face, ordinary clothes, nothing memorable, except for his eyes. His eyes were attentive, piercing, professional. The eyes of a man who looks and sees. He stood at the edge of the yard and watched So Dohan for 15 minutes. So Dohan felt the gaze after 10 minutes. He didn't turn around. He kept working. The man left without a word. So Dohan asked Pak. Pak hadn't seen him. He asked the old men. Old man Cho had seen him. He described him. Short, ordinary, attentive eyes. So Dohan remembered. Something was off. A man who silently watches the work in the butcher's yard for 15 minutes. Not a buyer, not a customer, not a curious onlooker, an observer, a professional observer. The Chamber of Cores. That thought came to him at night. The Chamber of Cores. An organization that registers talents, identifies anomalies, and eliminates them if necessary. Inquisitors. His predecessor had mentioned them in the notebook, briefly, dryly. They come quietly, they watch, they assess, then they decide. So Dohan lay on his bunk and counted. 80 days, 2 absorbed abilities, 15 types in the catalog. Crystal output from the processing yard had quadrupled. Unregistered potions on the market. The Chanryon Guild had been rejected. The alchemy chamber had confiscated the goods. And now the Chamber of Cores had sent an observer. He was drawing too much attention. He needed to speed things up. He needed status, legal status, not a gray bandage, not a dummy, a hunter. He pulled his predecessor's notebook from under the floorboard. He reread the section on the ranking system. Hunters were divided into ranks from F to S. Rank was assigned through the nuclear chamber's exam. For the exam, one had to demonstrate combat ability, kill a creature of a certain rank under controlled conditions, or complete an obstacle course, or both. The exam was open, formally. Any citizen of Hyungyun could apply. Anyone, including a dummy. There wasn't a single clause that explicitly prohibited dummies from taking the exam, because no one thought F would even try. Why would they? Without talent, without mana, without abilities. The E rank exam required killing an E rank creature, one, under controlled conditions, in the arena, with a weapon of their choice. Dohan reckoned he had two absorbed abilities, skin hardening, night vision, plus a paralyzing solution, plus knowledge of the anatomy of every E rank creature in the catalog, plus a scalpel from Yuna. Is that enough? No, not enough. He needs more. He needs another 2 or 3 abilities, low-rank ones, compatible ones, that won't conflict with the ones he's already absorbed. He opened his notebook, the catalog. 35 species. Each one's ability gland is described, with properties, with characteristics. He began searching. An ability that would complement skin hardening and night vision, not duplicate them, complement them. Like a new tool in a set, not a second hammer, but pliers. He found 3 candidates. First, the deceptive beetle, F rank. Ability, scent camouflage. The beetle hid its scent from predators, useful for night hunting. Second, the scout spider, E rank. Ability, detecting weak spots. The spider could see cracks in the armor of other creatures, points of vulnerability. Incredibly useful. For a hunter, for a surgeon, for someone taking an exam. Third, shadow viper, F rank. Ability, heart rate deceleration. The viper slowed its pulse to a minimum to appear dead. Pulse control, adrenaline control, panic control. For a doctor working under stress. Perfect. 3 abilities, 3 night hunts, 3 extractions, 3 absorptions, 3 rejection cycles, at least 3 weeks. He started that very night. 3 weeks went into 3 abilities. Odor masking from the deceiver beetle, reading weak spots from the scout spider, slowing the heartbeat from the shadow horror. Each absorption was a separate story. The deceiver beetle was easy. The gland is small, dry, minimal rejection. Temperature 37.8, back to normal in 2 hours. The result was subtle. With Dohan, he stood in the market crowd and not a single dog turned its head. Before, animals reacted to the scent of bodily fluids on his clothes. Not anymore. His scent had become neutral, invisible. Not to humans, to predators. The scout spider was different, E rank. The first ability is higher than F. The gland is larger, more active. It contained more pure mana than all the previous ones combined. His predecessor wrote that absorbing an E rank requires preparation, at least 2 successful F ranks beforehand, so the body can get used to it. So Dohan had 3 F ranks, enough. He extracted the scout spider's gland during a night hunt. The spider was fast, smart, with 8 eyes and reflexes 4 times faster than a human's. The paralyzing solution only worked halfway. The spider slowed down but didn't stop. So Dohan got a cut on his left forearm, not deep. The skin reinforcement softened the blow, but blood flowed. His first blood in this world. He finished off the spider with a second vial of the solution. He extracted the gland, bandaged his arm, went home. Ju-young saw the blood and turned pale. He said it was just a scratch. She didn't believe him. She treated the wound herself. Her hands were shaking, but she did it correctly. He had taught her over the course of 2 months. A clean cloth, an antiseptic decoction made from the bile of a marsh reptile, a pressure bandage. She did everything in silence, with teary eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't scold him. She just did it. Then she sat down next to him and rested her head on his shoulder. Not like a sister, like... He didn't finish the thought. He pushed her away, gently. He said he needed to sleep. She nodded. She left. He lay there and stared at the ceiling. 22 years old. She is 3 years older than this body, 4 years younger than his actual age. She raised the boy he had taken over. She is not a sister, not a mother. Not. He forced himself to think of the spider. A scout. The spider's gland had been hard to digest. A temperature of 39.9. The limit. He lay there for 6 hours. Vomited twice. Chills. Leg cramps. Ju-young sat beside him. Changed the wet rags on his forehead. Gave him water. He was conscious, but barely. His body was fighting. Accepting. Rejecting. Accepting again. By morning, his temperature had dropped. 37.3. He sat up. His head was buzzing. The world looked different. No colors, no shapes, lines. He saw lines on every object, thin, barely noticeable, cracks, points of tension, weak spots. He looked at the wall of the cubbyhole, a crack from the corner to the middle. If he struck the point where the three lines intersected, the wall would collapse. He looked at the stool, the joint where the left leg met the seat, weak. One blow and the leg would fly off. He looked at his hands, at his knuckles, micro cracks in the skin, old ones, from work, reading weak spots. He saw vulnerabilities in any object, any body, any structure. For a hunter, it was a weapon. For a surgeon, it was knowledge. Where to cut so the tissue would part cleanly. Where not to cut so as not to damage. Every creature now stood before him like a glass model with illuminated points. Hit here, don't hit here. Cut here, don't cut here. Third absorption, shadow snake, slowed heartbeat, moderate effect, temperature exactly 39, 4 hours, immediate result. So Dohan sat on the cot and felt his pulse. 72, normal. He concentrated, slowed it down. 60, 50, 45. His hands grew cold, his breathing slowed. He felt every heartbeat, like a metronome. He could speed it up, he could slow it down. Control. Total, absolute. For a surgeon, that meant one thing. No trembling in the hands. Never. Under no circumstances. Adrenaline under control. Panic under control. Fear under control. 5 abilities: skin hardening, night vision, odor masking, reading weaknesses, pulse control. None of them were combat abilities in the classical sense. No fire, no lightning, no superpowers. A surgeon's toolkit. An information hunter's toolkit. The toolkit of a man who doesn't strike first, but always knows where to strike if he has to. He was ready for the exam. On the 102nd day, Seo Dohan submitted an application to the Chamber of Corps for the E-rank hunter exam. The clerk behind the counter looked at the gray bandage. He looked at the application. He looked at the gray bandage again. He asked if the applicant had made a mistake. Seo Dohan said no. The clerk called the supervisor. The supervisor came over. He looked at the application. He looked at the bandage. He leafed through the charter. He leafed through it for a long time. A very long time. The charter was silent. Not a single article. Not a single clause. It wasn't forbidden for dummies. The supervisor stamped it. Silently, with the expression of a man signing a death warrant. The exam is in 10 days. Rumors spread that very evening. Pustushka had applied for the hunter's exam. The Eastern Quarter was buzzing. The slums were buzzing. The slaughterhouse was buzzing. Pak found out from Old Man Cho. He called for Seo Dohan. He closed the door. He asked straight out, "You've lost your mind." Seo Dohan said no. He said he needed status. Without status, they'd crush him. The alchemy chamber, the Chungnyeon Guild, and those who watch. Park knew about the Watcher. Everyone knew. Park was silent. He chewed his lip. Then he said one word. Careful. And he left. Ari found out from Ju Young. She ran over. She screamed. She said it was madness, that he would die, that monster Idong would kill him in a second. He listened, waited until she ran out of breath. Then he poured her some tea. She pushed the cup away. He poured again. She took it. She drank and cried. He said he wouldn't die. She asked how he knew. He said he knew the anatomy of every Idong creature in the catalog. He knows where each one's weak spot is. He knows how to paralyze them and where to strike. She said knowing and doing are two different things. He nodded. He said she was right. That's why he needed her help. 3 special potions for the exam. Reaction speed boost, post-exertion recovery, and a painkiller, just in case something goes wrong. She stopped crying, wiped her eyes, looked at him, professionally, like a partner, not like a girlfriend. Nodded, said she'd do it. Shi-hyun was the last to find out. She came in the evening, stood by the table, silently, for a long time. Then she said one sentence. She said that if he died during the exam, she would personally resurrect him so she could kill him again. Sohan nodded. He said he took note. She turned and left, back straight, steady stride, hands clenched into fists. Yuna Park ran in that morning. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She placed 3 items on the table. A scalpel, the very same one, resharpened. A knife, new, short, wide, made from the bone of a C-rank beast for close combat. And a small shield, a wrist shield, made from the shell of a horned earthworm. Lightweight, durable, for the left hand. She said what she'd been doing for 3 nights. Dohan looked at the shield, at the knife, at the scalpel. He looked at Yuna. She stood there with dark circles under her eyes. Her fingers were covered in fresh burns. 3 nights without sleep. For him. He said thank you, quietly. She nodded, turned away. Her shoulders trembled. So Dohan placed his hand on the top of her head, just like Ju Young on the first night. She froze. Then she sniffed. Then she ran away. The exam took place in the Chamber of Core's arena, a circular platform 50 meters in diameter, stone walls 3 men tall, rows of spectators above. On exam days, the arena was usually half empty. E-Rang, the lowest level exam, no one cares. But today, the stands were full. Rumors had done their job. The dummy is taking the hunter's exam. The first time in Hyungyang's history. People came to watch him die. So Dohan stood at the arena entrance and checked his pulse. 65. Normal. The control was working. Adrenaline was in his blood. But his heart isn't racing. His body is calm. His mind is calm. He was wearing an old jacket. He'd taken off his apron, a gray bandage on his left wrist. On his right wrist, a shield from Yuna. In his right hand, a combat knife. 3 vials on his belt. Potions from Ari. Reaction speed, recovery, painkiller. A scalpel in his left breast pocket. He didn't know why he'd brought a scalpel into battle. Habit. A surgeon without a scalpel feels naked. In the audience, he saw Ari. She was sitting in the front row, biting her nails with both hands. Yuna was next to her. Yuna wasn't biting her nails. Yuna was clenching her fists so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Ju Young sat quietly, hands on her knees, pale face. She didn't blink. Si-hyun Lee stood in the far corner of the audience, separate from everyone else, hood up, no gold band, incognito. But So Dohan saw her, by her posture, by her straight back, by the way she stood. Park didn't come. He said in the morning that he couldn't bear to watch this, but Old Man Cho said he'd seen Park at the east entrance, standing behind a column, hiding. The examiner entered the arena, an older man with graying temples and tired eyes. He read the rules. The contender must kill or incapacitate an E-rank beast within 10 minutes. Weapon of choice, no more than 3 potions allowed. Outside assistance is prohibited. Stepping outside the arena means failure. The chamber bears no responsibility for the contender's death. The contender signs a waiver of claims. Dohan signed it this morning, a boy's handwriting, not his own. The gate in the far wall of the arena opened. The creature emerged, an iron bull, E-rank, the size of a large calf, armor made of metal plates, 2 horns, 4 legs, fast, dumb, attacks with a ram. The whole hall knew it. The Iron Bull was a standard exam creature, easily predictable, straightforward. E-rank hunters killed it in 3 or 4 minutes, with fire, with ice, with a blade, with mana. So Dohan had none of these tools. The bull saw him, tilted its head, horns forward, hooves scraped against the stone. So Dohan did one thing. He looked. Weakness detection kicked in. The bull lit up with lines. Dozens of thin lines all over its body. Cracks, vulnerabilities, seams between armor plates, gaps. 3 points, 3 key points. First, the joint between the neck plates, on the side, on the right, a 2-finger gap, a nerve cluster beneath it. A strike there would paralyze the front half of the body. Second, the belly, unprotected by armor, soft, accessible only from below, when the bull is at full speed and slip underneath him. Third, the base of the right horn, a micro crack in the armor, an old one, probably from a previous battle. 1 precise strike and the horn will fall off. The bull charged. So Dohan drank the first potion. Reaction acceleration. The world slowed down. Not literally, his perception sped up. The bull was running, fast. But Sodohan saw every movement, every step, every turn of the head. He shifted to the right, half a step. The bull flew past. The horn passed 10 centimeters from his ribs. The hall gasped. The bull slowed down, turned around, charged again. Sodohan waited, counted the steps. 3, 2, 1. He moved to the left. The bull flew past, closer, 5 centimeters. Sodohan felt the heat from the armor, hot. The metal plates were heating up from friction against the air. Interesting. The thermodynamics of the creatures. Then, the bull turned for the third time, faster, more vicious. Sodohan didn't back away. He ran toward it. The hall fell silent. 3 meters. 2, 1. Sodohan fell, on his back. He slid across the stone floor beneath the bull, its belly above him, soft, unprotected. He didn't strike the belly. He struck the joint between the neck plates, from right, from bottom to top, with Yuna's combat knife, right into the gap. The blade went in 3 centimeters, the nerve plexus. The bull stumbled. Its front legs buckled. It crashed face first onto the stone. Its hind legs were still moving, twitching, kicking at the air. Sodohan rolled out from under him. He stood up. He approached from the side. The bull tried to get up. His front legs wouldn't obey him. The nerve plexus was damaged, partial paralysis. Sodohan took out a scalpel. He approached the base of the right horn. He found a microcrack. He inserted the tip of the scalpel. He twisted it. A click. The horn fell off. Clean. Even. As if along the cut line. The bull calf mooed. Quietly. Pitifully. Without the horn, he was half disarmed. Sodohan crouched down next to his muzzle. He looked into his eyes. 4 eyes. Cloudy. Frightened. He took out a vial of paralyzing solution. The last one. He dripped some onto a rag, pressed it against the bull's snout, between the nostrils. The bull twitched, went limp, froze, paralyzed. Sodohan stood up, turned to the examiner. The hall was silent, complete silence. Hundreds of people watched the skinny boy with a gray bandage standing over the paralyzed iron bull. No magic, no mana, no talent, just a knife and a scalpel. In 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The examiner descended into the arena. He approached the bull. He checked. Paralyzed. Alive. Damage to the nerve center. Broken horn. He looked at Sodohan for a long time. Then he announced, Contender Sodohan. Status? Blank. Result? Pass. Rank? E. The hall erupted. Not with applause, with shouts, with arguments. Someone shouted that it was a cheat. Someone shouted that it was impossible. Someone shouted that the rules needed to be changed. Sodohan stood in the arena and heard everything. And heard nothing. He looked at the stands. Ari stood there and cried. She covered her mouth with both hands. Yuna was jumping up and down and shouting something unintelligible. Ju-young was sitting. She didn't move. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She was smiling. For the first time in 2 months, she was smiling for real. Si-hyun Lee stood in the far corner with her back straight, watching. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't crying, but her hands were trembling. He saw it. Behind the column by the east entrance, Old Man Park blew his nose into a rag and pretended he had a cold. Sodohan raised his left hand, slowly. He grabbed the gray bandage. He pulled. The knot gave way. The rag fell onto the arena stones. Gray, dirty, old. 10 years on the wrist of a dead boy. 10 years of shame. He left it on the stones, turned around, walked toward the exit. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. 5 abilities found in no canon. 35 types in the catalog. A scalpel instead of a sword. And no magic. Only knowledge, training, and hands that remember 3,000 hours in the dissection room. 4 women were waiting for him at the exit. Ari rushed forward first, hugged him, little one, her head resting on his chin, crying into his jacket. Yuna rushed up second. She wrapped her arms around both of them. She shouted that she knew he could do it. Ju Young approached quietly. She stood beside him. She placed her hand on his cheek. She ran her thumb over it. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Shihun stood 3 steps away, hands behind her back, back straight. She nodded, once, briefly. He nodded back. They stood at the arena exit, the 5 of them, and someone in the audience sat there, not leaving, watching them. Not very tall, an ordinary face, ordinary clothes, attentive eyes, an observer. He didn't clap, he didn't shout. He was writing in a small notebook, in neat, small handwriting. So Dohan had seen him. The observer knew he was being seen. Their eyes met for a second. Then the observer closed the notebook, stood up, left. So Dohan remembered his face. Forever. The Chamber of Cores knew. Now it knew for sure. The clock was ticking. But today, a gray bandage lay on the stones of the arena, and 4 women stood nearby. And that was enough. For one day, for one evening, for one night when, for the first time in 112 days in this world, he fell asleep without a knife under his pillow. The morning after the exam, Sodohan's world changed. Not because he had become stronger, not because he had removed the bandage, but because the world had seen him, and the world wanted a piece. The merchants were the first to arrive. The merchants, 3 delegations in a single morning. The Peiko Guild sent a woman in silk with an offer of an exclusive contract to supply crystals. The independent trading house Meyer sent a man with a suitcase full of gold and a 20-page contract. The alchemy chamber sent the same clerk who had confiscated Ari's potions. The clerk smiled. He spoke of a license. He said that now that Sodohan was an Erang hunter, he had the right to apply for an alchemy license, for a modest fee of 100 gold pieces and an annual fee of 30, and an inspection every 3 months. Sodohan listened to each one, politely, attentively. He turned them all down, politely, quietly, without explanation. They left with the same expression on their faces: confusion, anger, calculation. He knew the rejections would cost him dearly, but he remembered one thing from his past life. In Seattle, in his 3rd year of residency, the senior pathologist, Dr. Martinez, had told him once, "Daniel, never sign a contract on the day it's offered to you. If the offer is real, it will wait. If not, then they're selling you a cage, not a partnership." All 3 offers were cages. Beautiful ones, gilded ones, but cages. Next came the journalists. Not real journalists, flyers, small print publications that circulated through the neighborhoods. Pustushka passed the hunter's exam. A sensation, a scandal, a hero, or a charlatan, or a threat. It depends on who's paying for the paper. The Eastern Quarter paper wrote that a local guy proved that power lies not in the core, but in the mind. The Guild Quarter paper wrote that the Chamber of Cores made a mistake and allowed a dangerous element to gain status. The Western Quarter paper wrote that the dummy used forbidden potions and the result must be annulled. So Dohan read all 3, calmly. He put them on the table. He told Ari that popularity is a disease. The acute phase lasts 2 weeks. Then everyone forgets. You just have to get through 2 weeks. Ari said he was an optimist. The problems came on the 3rd day, on the 4th day after the exam, in the evening. So Dohan was walking home through the alley behind the market, his usual route. Dark, no streetlights. Night vision kicked in automatically. Outlines, silhouettes, heat signatures. 3 signatures. Ahead, standing, waiting. He stopped, slowed his pulse. 45 beats. Calm, cold. His ability to read weak spots kicked in. 3 figures lit up as lines. The first, large, a fighter. Weak spot, left knee. Old injury, reconstructed bone. A blow there and he'll fall. Second, medium-sized, fast. Weak spot, throat, no protection. Third, small, standing behind the other 2. Not a fighter, an observer, or a commander. The first stepped forward. He said that Mr. So Dohan was invited for a conversation. So Dohan asked, with whom? The first one said, with people who were very interested in his talents. So Dohan said he didn't accept invitations in dark alleys. He said that if anyone wanted to talk, they should come to the slaughterhouse. During the day, in front of witnesses, the first one said that this wasn't an invitation, it was an urgent request. So Dohan looked at the third man, the little one, behind the 2 fighters. The scent mask was working. They couldn't smell his fear, but the fear was there. He wasn't a hero, he was a medical examiner. 5 F and E rank abilities, against 2 fighters. If they were D rank or higher, he didn't stand a chance. If C rank, he'd die in a second. He did the only thing he could. He screamed, loudly. Not a name, not a word, just a scream. Across the alley, across the block. Windows began to open, heads began to peek out. The first one flinched, the second took a step back, the third hissed something. So Dohan kept screaming, and he ran, back, toward the market, toward the people, toward the light. They didn't run after him, not with witnesses around. He ran out into the market, gasping for breath. His ribs ached, his body was weak. 19 years old, 4 months of training. It wasn't enough. Catastrophically insufficient. He ran to the slaughterhouse yard. Pak was there. Night shift. He saw his face, understood everything without words, sat him down, gave him water. He drank with Dohan and thought. He needed protection. Physical. Right now, not in 6 months. Not when he'd absorbed 10 more abilities. Now. He needed a fighter. On the 5th day after the exam, he found a fighter. Or rather, the fighter found him. So Dohan was walking through the market district in the morning. Carefully, in broad daylight, in public. He turned into the alley by Pak's smithy. Short, familiar, safe. A girl was sitting on the ground in the alley, leaning her back against the wall. Thin, bony, short hair, uneven, cut with a knife. Blood on her left side. A lot of blood. Her face was gray, her eyes were closed, her breathing was shallow. So Dohan stopped. His brain kicked in, automatically. Blood loss, significant. Pulse. He crouched down, took her wrist. Thread-like, 140. Shock, hypovolemic. Skin cold, clammy. Pupils. He lifted her eyelid, dilated, reacting to light. So the brain is still functioning. Wound. He carefully pulled the skin aside on her side. Deep cut. Rib cage. Left side. Intercostal muscles damaged. Lung. He listened. Breathing on the left is quieter than on the right. Pneumothorax. Air in the pleural cavity. The lung is collapsing. She had half an hour left. Maybe an hour. Maybe less. He worked quickly. Scalpel, a clean cloth from his pocket, a bottle of antiseptic. Always with him. Always. He cleaned the wound. Found the spot. Between the 2nd and 3rd ribs. On the left. Anterior axillary line. The standard spot for pneumothorax decompression. In Seattle, he would have used a 14-gauge needle. Here, he had a bone scalpel. He made a small puncture. Air hissed out. The lung expanded. Breathing on the left grew louder, more even. He bandaged the wound on her side. A pressure bandage, tight. He took out the recovery potion, the last one, from his stash. He poured it into her mouth, drop by drop, so she wouldn't choke. She coughed, opened her eyes. Dark, sharp, the eyes of a predator. Even in a daze, even in shock, the eyes of a killer. She flinched. Her hand darted toward her belt. It was empty. The sword was gone, but the reflex remained. Dohan didn't flinch. He placed his hand on her shoulder, gently but firmly. He said quietly, "Miss Kang, I need you to stay still. Your intercostal muscles are damaged, and there was partial compression of your left lung. I've decompressed it, but if you flinch, the suture will come apart. She froze. She looked at him. At the gray. No, not gray anymore. The bandages were gone. At the skinny guy in the scrubs, with bloodied hands, who was saying words she didn't understand but that sounded as if he knew exactly what he was doing. She asked hoarsely who he was. He said he was a doctor. She asked what a doctor was. He paused. Said he was a man who fixed people. She closed her eyes, opened them, asked if he could fix her so she could get up and leave. He said no, not today. Said she needed 2 days of rest, fluid, protein, sleep. She said she didn't have 2 days. They were after her. He asked who. She said the Silver Blade sect. So Dohan knew that name. Someone else's memory. One of the capital's combat sects. The elite. Their fighters were D and C rank. She was from the sect, and she was running. He didn't ask why. Not now. He picked her up. She was light. Too light. Bones under skin. Muscle without fat. The body of a fighting machine. Nothing superfluous, including food. He carried her into the small room. Ju Young saw and didn't ask a single question. She spread out a clean mat, brought water, brought rice. With Dohan, she laid the girl down, checked the bandage, checked her breathing. Steady, chest expanded. The suture held. She lay there and stared at the ceiling. Then she turned her head toward him. She asked how much she owed. He shook his head, said nothing. She frowned, said she had to pay, that she always paid. She tried to sit up. He put his hand on her shoulder. He said one sentence. Miss Kang, I don't need your sword. I need you to finish your rice. You haven't eaten in 3 days. You're hypoglycemic. You're going to pass out. She froze, with a spoon in her hand, rice in the bowl in front of her, hot, with fish. Ju Young placed the fish on top, just as she always did, carefully, as if apologizing for her very existence. The girl looked at the rice, then at So Dohan, then at Ju Young, who stood by the door with wet hands and warm eyes. No one had ever told her to finish her meal. No one had ever placed fish on her rice so carefully. No one had ever fixed her lung in an alley for free. She picked up the spoon. Her hand trembled. She ate. Everything, down to the last grain. Then she lay down. She fell asleep in 30 seconds. Min-Soo Kang, 19 years old, the best fighter of her generation, S-tier talent. She ran away from a cult because they were selling her into marriage for the sake of an alliance. With a sword instead of a childhood, and not a single person in the world who would tell her to finish her rice. Until today. Sohan sat next to her and watched her sleep. Her breathing was even, her pulse was stable. 85. Normal for a state after a shock. Ju Young brought him tea. He took it. He drank in silence, beside her. She asked quietly who this girl was. He said he didn't know, not yet. Ju Young nodded. She looked at the sleeping Min-Soo, at her hands, calloused from the sword, scarred, hands older than her face. Ju Young tucked the blanket around her, with the same gesture she used to tuck Dohan in when he was 13. Min-Soo Kang was back on her feet in 3 days. On the 4th, she demanded a sword. On the 5th, she went out into the courtyard and practiced her basic stances. With Dohan watched from the window, her body moved differently than any body he had seen in this world, fluidly, without unnecessary movements. Every gesture began at her center of gravity and radiated outward like a wave. S rank. He saw what that meant. Not power, perfection. She was a perfect machine for one single purpose: to kill with a blade. But the machine had breakdowns, not physical ones. He had healed her lung. Her ribs were healing. Her body was recovering quickly. An Urank body healed faster than usual. The malfunctions were of a different kind. She didn't speak during meals. She ate standing up, like a soldier. She slept on the floor even when Ju Young laid out a mattress for her. She woke at the slightest sound. Her hand went straight to her belt, to the sword that wasn't there. She didn't know how to sit at a table with people, didn't know how to talk if the conversation wasn't about battle. When Ari came in that evening and started chatting about herbs, Minsu stood up and went to a corner. Not out of rudeness, out of confusion. She didn't know what to do with words that weren't orders or commands. So Dohan gave her time, a week. In the second week, he started talking. Not about fighting, about food. He asked what she ate in the sect. She said rice, water, sometimes meat before tournaments, for strength. He nodded. He made broth, strong, with vegetables. He set it in front of her. She ate silently. But she sat down, at the table, next to Ju Young, next to Ari. In the third week, Ari served her seconds without asking. Minsu looked at her. Ari smiled. Minsu didn't smile back, but she ate the seconds. Yuna was the easiest of them all. Yuna didn't ask. Yuna came in, she saw Minsu, saw her broken sword, which Minsu carried around like a child carries a blanket, said she'd fix it. Minsu said the sword was made of moon steel and that there were 2 moon steel smiths in the capital and both worked for the sect. Yuna snorted, took the sword, brought it back 3 days later, repaired. The blade was smooth, the balance was perfect, the hilt was rewrapped in fresh leather. Minsu took the sword, she twirled it, she made 3 swings in the air, she froze. She looked at Yuna. She asked quietly how she had done it. Yuna shrugged. She said that metal is metal, moon steel or ordinary steel. Listen to it, and it will tell you what it wants. Minsu looked at her for a long time. Then she said one word, "Thank you." Yuna blushed and ran away. Dohan watched all this and thought. 5 women, Ju Young, Ari, Si-hyun, Yuna, Minsu. Each had come to him through pain. He had fixed something for each of them. Their hands, their self-esteem, worldview, a lung. And now they were all here, in his tiny room that could no longer fit 5 people. He needed more space. On the 130 day, 3 things happened. First, so Dohan passed his D-rank exam, quietly, without spectators. He requested a closed exam. The chamber granted it. In the arena was a shadow bear, D-rank, dangerous, fast, smart. So Dohan worked with Minsu. She was his sword. He was her eyes. He told her where to strike. She struck. 4 blows, each to a weak spot that he saw and she didn't. The bear collapsed in 2 minutes. The examiner recorded it. D-rank, a team of 2. So Dohan, Kang Min-soo, pass. Second, Shi-hyun Lee brought a patient to him, his first official one. Not the boy with the leg, an adult hunter, C-rank, from the Lee house. Damage to the mana channels in both hands, 3 years. The best healers in the house couldn't help. Shi-hyun brought him to So-dohan at night, secretly. If the head of the house found out that his healer was bringing patients to a former butchering apprentice, the scandal would be deafening. So Dohan examined the hunter. 20 minutes, palpation, percussion, observation, diagnosis. The damage is not in the mana channels. The mana channels are intact. The arterial walls in both forearms are damaged. Microaneurysms, dozens. Blood was seeping into the surrounding tissues. The swelling was pressing on the mana channels from the outside. The channels are not damaged. They are compressed, like a hose that's been stepped on. He explained to Si-hyun, quietly, clearly. She listened, eyes wide, hands clenched into fists. She had seen damage to the mana channels 3 years. Everyone had seen it. No one had thought to look at what was nearby. He prescribed treatment, an ointment made from the vascular tissue of a creature filter. Si-hyun performed point healing according to his instructions, not into the channels, into the arteries. 3 sessions. A week later, the hunter was wiggling his fingers. 2 weeks later, he was clenching his fist. 3 weeks later, he was holding a weapon. Si-hyun stood nearby and watched him work. During the fifth session, she said quietly that he had destroyed everything she knew about medicine. So Dohan said he hadn't destroyed it. He had supplemented it. She shook her head. She said he didn't understand. She said that to her, it was one and the same. He looked at her. She was standing in the dim light of the back room, without her gold headband. Her hair had come loose from its knot, dark circles under her eyes. She came to see him every evening after her full shift at the Lee Clinic. She wasn't getting enough sleep. She wasn't eating enough. She was doing the same thing she'd done her whole life, working herself to the bone for others. He told her to sit down. She sat down. He poured her some tea, the same one. The one he used to make for Ari. Warm, with mint. Si-hyun Lee took the cup in both hands. She drank in small sips. She didn't look up. Her fingers on the cup were slender and long, the fingers of a healer, beautiful. He turned away, poured himself some. They drank tea in silence. In the back room of the slaughterhouse, carcasses lay nearby. It smelled of manna fluid and mint. She said, without looking up, that she hated the taste of this tea. He said he knew, so he added honey. She looked up. She looked at him, for a long time. Then she looked down, finished her tea, stood up, left. Back straight, steady stride, but at the door, she turned around. For half a second. And left. The third thing, the observer came again, not to the slaughterhouse, to So Do-han's home, to the tiny room in the slums. He was standing at the door when So Do-han returned in the evening. Short, ordinary, attentive eyes. This time he spoke, introduced himself, said his name was Han Ji-soo, said he was an assistant to the Master Inquisitor of the Chamber of Cores, said that Master Inquisitor Yoon Chol-soo wanted to speak with So Do-han, in person, tomorrow, at the chamber. So Do-han asked what it was about. Han Ji-soo said everything, and left. So Do-han stood at the door of his little room. Yoon Chol-soo, Master Inquisitor. His predecessor had mentioned that name in the notebook, once, without explanation, just the name, and one word next to it. Careful. So Do-han went in, sat down on the cot. He took out his predecessor's notebook. He reread it. He found the page. Yoon Chol-soo, be careful. And below that, another line he had missed before, in small handwriting, in the margins. He had been in the tower too. So Do-han closed the notebook. Yoon Chol-soo, former top hunter. He lost his team in the Tower of the Claw. He was the only one to survive. And now he hunts for anomalous talents. His predecessor knew about him. His predecessor warned him. Tomorrow, So Do-han will go to the Chamber of Cores. Alone. Without Min-soo. Without Ari. Without Si-hyun. Alone. The Chamber of Cores occupied a stone building in the center of the capital. Gray, massive, unadorned. A building that doesn't try to impress. A building that feels oppressive. So Do-han entered through the main entrance. They were waiting for him. They led him down a corridor. Long, quiet, bare walls, closed doors. Something was happening behind every door. He didn't know what. He didn't want to know. They led him into a room, a small one, a table, 2 chairs, a window. Outside the window, a gray sky with cracks. A man was sitting in a chair at the table. So Do-han saw him and his brain kicked in automatically. 41 years old, above average height, broad shoulders, large hands. A former fighter. His body was still powerful, but starting to give out. The face. The face was interesting. Not evil, not kind. Tired. Deeply tired. The shadows under his eyes weren't from insomnia, but from something else. Chronic. Long-standing. His right hand lay on the table. His left was under the table. So Do-han noticed. The left one is always hidden. Yoon Chol-soo, Master Inquisitor of the Chamber of Cores, formerly the best hunter of his generation, the sole survivor of the Tower of the Claw. Yoon nodded toward a chair. So Do-han sat down. They looked at each other. Yoon spoke first, quietly. No threats, no pressure. He said he'd studied his case. A pacifier, revoked membership in Chunryeon, the slaughterhouse, crystals, potions. E rank exam, D rank exam, unregistered abilities, at least 5, of unknown origin. So Dohan listened. Yoon continued. He said that in the entire history of the chamber, there had never been a single case where a non-member had received a combat rank. Not a single one. He said it was an anomaly. He said that his job was to identify anomalies, classify them, register them. Or he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Or eliminate them. So Dohan nodded. He said he understood. Yoon continued. He said he had 2 questions. First, how did a dummy without a core acquire abilities? Second, who taught him? So Dohan thought for 30 seconds. The pulse monitor was working. 60 beats. Even. Calm. He could have lied. He could have told part of the truth. He could have refused to answer. He chose otherwise. He looked Yoon Chol-soo in the eyes and told the truth. Partial, but the truth. He said he absorbs the abilities of creatures through extraction and ingestion into specific organs, that it's not a talent, not a core, not mana. It's knowledge, anatomical knowledge. He knows how creatures are built from the inside, knows where the ability is stored, knows how to extract it, knows how to process it, knows how to absorb it so the body doesn't reject it. Yoon listened. His expression didn't change. So Dohan continued. He said no one taught him. He said he figured it out himself, through autopsies, through observation, through hundreds of hours of work with carcasses at the slaughterhouse. Yoon was silent. Then he asked a third question, one So Dohan hadn't expected. He asked if So Dohan had ever seen a human corpse whose core looked different from the rest. So Dohan froze. A human corpse with an unusual core. He hadn't seen one, but his predecessor had. His predecessor's notebook, records of cores, empty shells that aren't empty. They're waiting. He didn't answer the question. He asked his own. He asked why the Master Inquisitor was asking. Yoon leaned back in his chair. He looked out the window for a long time. Then he spoke, and his voice changed. It grew quieter, deeper, older. He told the story about the Tower of the Claw. 3 years ago, 50 A-Rang hunters went in. The best. His team. His friends. 20 years together. Inside the tower, everything was not as they had expected. The creatures behaved differently, moved differently. Some spoke in human words. One of them approached his best friend, an A-Rang hunter, and said his name. A name the creature couldn't possibly know. And then the creature opened its mouth, and inside was... Yoon fell silent. His hand under the table twitched. So Dohan waited. Yoon continued. Inside was a face. A human face. In the creature's mouth. The face of a man Yoon knew, who had died in the tower 10 years ago. On the last expedition. A man long dead. So Dohan listened and felt a chill run down his spine. Creatures with human faces. Creatures that know names. Dead people inside living monsters. The Tower of the Claw. The mirror. The predecessor's notebook. Who is transporting people? The knowledge of the dead seeps into the rift space, distorts the creatures. He was beginning to understand. Not everything, but enough to be afraid. Yoon said his team had perished in 14 minutes. He pulled out the last one, his deputy, dragged him on his back toward the exit. The deputy's channel of his deputy was leaking out. It was breaking down. Yoon got burned. His left hand. He dragged him out. The deputy died at the exit, in his arms. Yoon came out alone, with a burn on his left hand, one that hadn't healed in 3 years. So Dohan listened. He looked at his left hand under the table. Yoon didn't show it. He hid it for 3 years, like a gray bandage. Only his bandage was made of pain, not shame. So Dohan was silent. Then he said one thing. He said he wanted to see the hand. Yoon raised his head, looked at him, sharply. So Dohan held his gaze. He said he wasn't an inquisitor, nor a hunter, nor a politician. He said he was a doctor.
just a doctor, and a doctor has only one question for any person: where does it hurt? Yun Chol Su is 41 years old, a master inquisitor, a man who hunts anomalies, a man who could order So Dohan's elimination with a single word.
He looked at the skinny 20-year-old boy across from him, at the former empty shell, at the butcher, at the doctor, and slowly, very slowly, like a man undressing in front of a stranger, he pulled his left arm out from under the table, placed it on the table. The sleeve rode up. Beneath it, a bandage. Not gray, white, but old, yellowed with age. So Dohan reached out his hand. Yoon didn't pull it away. So Dohan untied the bandage, slowly, carefully. Under the bandage was a burn, black, unhealed, in the shape of an open palm. The palm of his deputy. The imprint of a mana channel that ran outward, scorched into the skin, into the muscles, down to the bone. 3 years, 7 A-rank healers. No one had managed it. So Dohan looked at the burn. His anatomical eye was working. His ability to read weak points was working. He saw. The burn was no ordinary one. A mana burn. Foreign mana had seeped into the tissue and wouldn't leave. It was stuck, like a shard, like a foreign body. The healers tried to flood it with their own mana. Fresh mana clashed with the stuck mana. It got worse. Because they were treating with mana what needed to be treated without mana. The same mistake they made with the boy. The same mistake they made with the hunter from the Lee household. They always treated with mana. But the problem wasn't the mana. The problem was the flesh. He looked Yoon in the eyes. He spoke softly. "It's okay." Yoon nodded. So Dohan took his kit out of his pocket. A small bundle. A scalpel. Vials. Needles. Rags. He always carried it with him. Always. Just as a surgeon carries a stethoscope. He began to work. First, an examination. Palpation around the burn. Yoon didn't flinch. He was used to the pain. Then So Dohan took out a thin bone needle. Yoon's work. A micro-instrument for delicate operations. He began extracting the foreign mana from the tissue. Not with mana, with a needle, physically, piece by piece, like removing shards, drop by drop. A dark liquid rose to the surface, thick, oily, the mana of his dead friend, stuck in his hand for 3 years. So Dohan worked for 18 minutes, silently, intently, pulse 45. His hands didn't tremble. Yoon sat motionless, watching, not at his hand, at So Dohan's face, at his eyes, at his concentration, at his calmness. When So Dohan finished, he rinsed the wound with antiseptic, applied ointment from the adrenal glands of the creature and the vascular tissue of the filter, a special formula for deep mana burns. He had developed it a month ago, for Park. Park had minor mana burns on his hands from work. This one wasn't minor, but the principle was the same. He bandaged it with a clean cloth, thin, soft. Ju Young had given it from her own supplies. He raised his head. Yoon Chol Soo looked at his hand, at the fresh bandage, white, clean. Then he looked at So Dohan, then at his hand, and exhaled, long, all the way, all the air from his lungs. 3 years, 3 years of pain, 3 years of guilt, 3 years with the palm of a dead friend on his hand. And now, for the first time in 3 years, it didn't hurt. He asked quietly, so that only So Dohan could hear, "Kid, who are you?" So Dohan wiped his hands with a rag, carefully, out of habit. He put the instruments in a bundle, put it in his pocket, straightened his apron. He answered calmly, just as he would answer a patient in Seattle at 3 in the morning. "I'm a doctor, just a doctor." Then he stood up, looked at Yoon, said it would heal in a week, that the bandage should be changed every day, that he'd have his assistant bring the ointment. Then he said something else. He said that the second man from the left, among his people standing in the hallway, seemed to have high blood pressure. Tell him to come in. And one more thing, Mr. Yoon. I have a lot of questions for you. About the tower. Yoon Chol Soo. the master inquisitor, the man who had come to interrogate him. He sat at the table and looked at his hand beneath the fresh bandage, and on his face was an expression that his assistant, Han Ji-soo, had never seen once in 5 years of service: confusion. A week after the meeting in the chamber, Yoon Chol-soo came to the slaughterhouse, without his uniform, without entourage, without an assistant, in plain clothes, with the face of a man who had made a decision and didn't know if it was the right one. Seo Do-han was cleaning the table after work. He saw him. He nodded, like an old acquaintance. Yoon sat down on a crate, silently. Seo Do-han kept cleaning. 10 minutes later, Yoon spoke. He said his hand didn't hurt, for the first time in 3 years. He said he'd taken the bandage off yesterday. The scar was pink, clean, new skin. Seo Do-han nodded, said it was to be expected. Yoon was silent for a moment. Then he pulled a folder from his breast pocket. Thick, worn. He placed it on the table. He said these were his personal notes on the Tower of the Claw. Unofficial. The chamber doesn't know they exist. 3 years of observations. 3 years of trying to understand what happened. So Do-han looked at the folder, then at Yoon. Yoon said he wasn't switching sides, said he had no side, said he had 50 dead friends and not a single answer. And if the kid from the butcher shop could find the answer, then let him look. And he, Yoon, would stand by and make sure the kid wasn't killed along the way. So Do-han took the folder. He opened it. The first page, a floor plan of the Claw Tower, a floor-by-floor layout, with notes. Yoon had drawn it from memory, 3 years later, a hunter's memory. So Do-han looked at the plan and saw. He saw the structure. He saw the system. The tower wasn't a building. The tower was an organism. The corridors were like vessels. The rooms were like organs. And in the center, right in the center, an empty space. No markings. Yoon circled it and put a question mark next to it. So Do-han knew what was there. A mirror. The predecessor knew. He wrote it in the notebook. A mirror, not an artifact. The door. He didn't tell Yoon. Not yet. It's too soon. He needs more information. He needs more trust. Yoon left by evening. He left the folder. So Do-han sat up late into the night and read. Maps, descriptions of the creatures from the tower, testimonies of survivors who didn't exist. Yoon was the only one. But there were testimonies from people who lived nearby, who saw black steam, who felt their cores dim. 5 kilometers around the tower, the attenuation zone. People's cores in this zone dimmed. They didn't go out, they dimmed. And so Do-han thought, they dimmed, like in the empty ones. The Claw Tower was creating empty ones. No, the Claw Tower was showing that a core could be extinguished, that the core isn't a constant, that the core can be turned on and off, like a light bulb. And if it can be turned off, then it can also be... He closed the folder, lay down on the cot, took out his predecessor's notebook, reread it. Don't trust the core. The core is a cage. The predecessor knew. The core isn't a source of power. The core is a limiter, a frame, a control system. They scan your core at age 7. They say your talent is fire, and your whole life you are fire. Only fire. Nothing but fire. But what if the core doesn't define talent? What if the core limits? What if without the core, anything is possible? Empty cores. An empty core. Not dim, not weak, empty. Turned off. Free. Without a frame. Without a limiter, the predecessor wrote. Empty cores aren't empty. They're waiting. Waiting for what? Waiting for someone from Earth. Someone who doesn't know the rules of this world. Someone who will use a body without a core differently. Not through mana channels. Through blood. Through digestion. Through physics. Through chemistry. Through knowledge. That is why the mirror chooses the empties. That is why the gray bandage. Not a mark of shame. A sign. An invitation. A body ready for a guest. So Dohan lay there, breathing evenly, 45 beats per minute. Control. Complete. He was beginning to see the picture, the big picture. Someone created the mirror 500 years ago, the first intruder, who died an old man. The mirror captures people from Earth at the moment of death, places them in the bodies of the dummies. Every intruder brings knowledge: a doctor, an engineer, chemist, programmer. Knowledge seeps into the world, changes it. The creatures mutate, acquire human traits. Because the knowledge of the dead strays seeps into the space of the rifts. Claw's tower collapsed because one of the strays died inside. His knowledge, his memory, his way of thinking. All of it poured into the tower's space. The creatures became different. They began to speak. They learned names. They became half-humans. It wasn't an attack. It was an infection. Knowledge, information. The world of Hyungyang is infected by people from Earth, and someone is doing this on purpose. Not the mirror. The mirror is a tool. Someone behind the mirror. Someone who decides who to pull over, who and when. The predecessor. Then So Dohan. Then Emily. He didn't know about her yet, but he would soon. The following week, So Dohan gathered everyone. In the evening, in the small room. Juyeon, Ari, Sihyun, Yuna, Minsu, and Yoon Chol-soo, who stood against the wall with his arms crossed over his chest. 6 people, his team. He told them, not everything, not about Earth, not about his past life, but about the Tower of the Claw, about the notes he'd found, about the dampening zone, about the cores that can be extinguished, about the creatures that are mutating, about how something is breaking at the level of the world's rules, and about how he wants to go to the tower, to look, to study, to understand. Silence. Ari spoke first. She asked when. He said in a month. Preparation is needed. Minsu nodded. She didn't ask anything. Her sword lay on her lap. Sihyun said she would go. Her voice was steady. Her hands were clenched. Yuna said she would do whatever was needed. Any weapon, any tool. Ju-young was silent. Then she stood up. She walked over to him. She placed her hand on his shoulder. She said quietly, "Me too." So Dohan looked at her. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say it was dangerous. He wanted to say she had to stay. She looked him in the eyes, calmly, firmly, the way she had never looked at him before. Not like an older sister, not like a servant, like a woman who had made up her mind. He didn't say no. Yoon Chol-soo stood by the wall and watched. The boy who, in 6 months, had gathered people around him, not by force, not by money, not by power, by fixing them. He had fixed each and every one of them, and every one of them was now ready to follow him into the tower from which no one had ever returned. Yoon thought that either this guy was a genius, or a madman, or both, and that in any case, he would go with them. Because Yoon had 50 friends left in the tower, and he needed answers just as much as So Dohan did. A month of preparation began the next morning. They set out for the Tower of the Claw at dawn on the 240th day. 7 of them. So Dohan in front, Minsu beside him, a sword at his belt, his eyes calm. Behind them, Shi-hyun, his white coat replaced with travel clothes, a golden bandage in his pocket. Ari, with a bag of herbs and potions on his back. Yuna, with a set of tools at his belt. Ju-young, with a flask of warm water and bandages. Yoon Chol-soo brought up the rear. His hands are free. His left hand is unbandaged. A pink scar on his wrist glistened in the morning light. Claw Tower stood on the plain, a 4-hour walk from the capital. From a distance, it looked like an ordinary stone tower. Tall, dark, abandoned. Up close, everything was different. The stone wasn't stone. It was breathing, slowly, barely perceptibly. The walls pulsed, like arteries. So Dohan placed his palm on the wall, warm, alive. He looked at Yoon. Yoon nodded. 3 years ago, the walls had been cold, dead. Something had changed. Something was growing inside. They entered. The corridor was narrow, dark, so Dohan's night vision kicked in. He could make out the outlines, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, heat signatures ahead, small, creatures. He raised his hand, stopped the group. Small creatures, F rank, but different, unlike any species in the catalog. He looked closer. His ability to read weak points kicked in. Lines on the creatures' bodies, strange, familiar. Not creature patterns, human patterns. The mana channels of these creatures ran the way mana channels ran in humans. Not in creatures, in humans. He turned to Si-hyun, quietly told her to take a look. She looked, turned pale, whispered that it was impossible. It was a human channel structure inside a creature's body. Minsu didn't wait. 3 movements. The creatures lay motionless. So Dohan crouched over one. He cut it open, quickly, as usual. Inside, he froze. Inside the creature, instead of the standard ability gland, lay an organ. Familiar, small, oval, with mana channels radiating from it like rays. A core. A human core inside the creature's body. So Dohan stared. Si-hyun stared. Yoon stood behind them, his face pale. He had seen this before. 3 years ago. Creatures with human features, with human faces, with human names. And now with human cores. The Tower of the Claw did not create monsters. The Tower of the Claw turned people into monsters, or monsters into people. The line was blurring. They went deeper. The creatures were becoming more numerous, stronger. D rank, C rank. Minsu worked, cleanly, quickly. Every strike aimed at the weak spot So Dohan had pointed out. Si-hyun treated minor wounds. Ari handed out the necessary potions. Yuna repaired weapons on the fly. Ju-young carried water and bandages. Yoon covered the rear. A team, not a squad, not an army, a surgical unit. So Dohan at the center, he gave brief instructions, by name, like a chief surgeon. Minsu on the left, Si-hyun on the right, Ari behind them, Yuna beside him. Ju-young with a flask, Yang bringing up the rear. They worked as a single organism. 7 hands, 1 brain. They reached the center 4 hours later, a large hall, round. The ceiling was lost in the darkness. The walls pulsed more strongly, like a heart. Boom, boom, boom. In the center of the hall stood a mirror, huge, 3 times a person's height. The frame was made of a material So Dohan didn't recognize. Not stone, not metal, not bone. Something alive. The frame pulsed in rhythm with the walls. The mirror's surface was dark. It didn't reflect. It absorbed. So Dohan approached, slowly. Pulse 45. Control. Complete. He stood before the mirror and looked. The darkness in the mirror moved, slowly, like smoke underwater. And in that darkness, he saw a face. Not a reflection. Another face. An old one. A man's. Asian, with wrinkles around the eyes, with tired, wise eyes. The face was looking at him. So Dohan looked at the face. He knew who it was. Knew not because he had seen it before, knew because he understood. The first to arrive, 500 years ago, the man who created the mirror, who died an old man in this world, who didn't leave, who stayed, inside, waiting. The face in the mirror moved its lips, silently, but So Dohan read it, from the lips, just as he had read the silent surveillance footage in the morgue. 3 words. You've come, finally. So Dohan stood before the mirror. Behind him stood 6 people, each of whom had come here because he had fixed them. Ju-young, whose hands no longer hurt. Ari, who found her voice, Shi-hyun, who found a second medicine, Min-soo, who ate her fill for the first time, Yuna, who was called a master, Yoon, whose 3-year-old wound had healed. He had fixed each of them, and each of them was now standing behind him, breathing, alive, whole, ready. So Dohan looked at the face in the mirror, and for the first time in this world, he spoke in English, out loud, quietly, so that only he and the mirror could hear. He said, "I'm here. What do you need me to fix?" The face in the mirror smiled, sadly, wearily, like a surgeon smiles after a 20-hour operation when the patient has survived. The mirror flashed. White light, bright, blinding. Everyone closed their eyes. So Dohan didn't close his. He watched. Light filled the room. The walls stopped pulsing. They froze. Silence. Absolute. And in that silence, So Dohan heard it. Not with his ears, inside. A voice. Old. Warm. Tired. The voice spoke a single sentence, in Korean, with a slight Seoul accent. With the intonation of a man who had waited 500 years, the voice said, "Welcome, Dr. Seo. We have a lot of work here." So Dohan stood in the white light at the center of the claw tower, before a mirror that was not a mirror, but a door. Behind him, 6 people. Ahead, 500 years of secrets. Fault lines that needed to be closed. Creatures that had been human, creatures that were once cells, a world cracking at the seams. And him. A pathologist from Seattle, 27 years old, 3rd year of residency. With an open case, just like Kim's. With a habit of washing his hands for 40 seconds. With a love for cold coffee from Trader Joe's. With 5 absorbed abilities of ranks F and E. With a bone scalpel in his pocket. With 4 women behind him, each of whom looked at him in a way he didn't know how to notice. With 1 woman waiting for him at home. With 1 former inquisitor who became an older brother. With his predecessor's notebook under the floorboards in the storage room. With his own notebook containing 42 types of creatures and a double map of mana channels and the circulatory system. With a pink scar on Yoon Chol-soo's wrist. With Min-soo Kang's sword, which clanged in its sheath. With Ari Jong's first harvest mountain mint. With Shi-hyun Lee's gold armband in the pocket of his travel jacket. With Yuna Park's finest scalpel near his heart. With Ju Young Han's warm water in a flask. With all of this. With all of them. Pathologists don't cry in the dirt. Pathologists make a diagnosis. They pick up a scalpel, and they get to work. He turned to his team. Faces in the white light. 6 faces, alive, waiting, ready. He spoke calmly, just as he would in the operating room at Harborview at 3 in the morning after 16 hours on his feet. "Right, we have a complicated case here. Let's figure this out." Min-soo placed her hand on her sword. Si-hyun squared her shoulders. Ari stopped biting her nails. Yuna clenched her fists. Ju-young smiled. Yoon Chol-soo nodded. And so Do-han turned back to the mirror, to the face that had been waiting for 500 years, to the door that needed to be opened, or closed, or fixed. He didn't know exactly what yet, but he was a doctor, and doctors don't leave until they've closed the case. Where, somewhere in the mirror, the old man with the Seoul accent laughed softly. The way people laugh when they finally waited long enough.